Your identity's been hijacked. Here on Burn the Corporate Fiction, we are exposing the legal entity identification, the straw man, tying you to a commercial trap. The straw man's your legal fiction, created by the corporate state via your birth certificate and social security number. The 14th Amendment, coerced in 1868, makes you a person under federal control, not a sovereign. Chisholm versus Georgia, 1793, says the people, not states, are sovereign. But this flips it, presuming you to be a legal fiction subject to the corporate state. Post-1933, after Congress mortgaged all estates, your legal entity identification, or straw man, connected to the Social Security trust account, became a nexus for contractual debt securities, commercial paper like traffic tickets and bonds. These aren't just fines, they're state profits, regulating your behavior through policy enforcement. States, complicit since the Buck Act, treat you as a foreign indentured servant, managing your estate via administration, taxes, licenses, and regulation of all property held in trust, creating an artificial commercial society. Now, AI and facial recognition, backed by programs like Pegasus and Palantir's tools, aim to bind you permanently to the straw man. Social media data manipulates your behavior via AI algorithms. Dissenters are targeted. This risks a permanent indenture, your life, forever administered, forfeiting sovereignty. Silence is consent. Resisting risks everything. The corporate state steals your sovereignty. AI makes it eternal. Uncover the truth on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, or X at Burn the Corporate Fiction.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Burn the Corporate Fiction. Here we are once again. Tonight we're going to be discussing seemingly separate topics that are actually entirely interrelated. The reason the government can sell and filter your data through artificial intelligence is because you are public property. So there is no expectation of privacy in the public. I bet the 1A auditors would never see that coming being used against them, right? There is no expectation of privacy while you are in the public. So I'm going to explain exactly what that means. We're going to start off tonight by discussing public versus private. This is open panel. Please feel free to come up and join me. Join in the discussion. No Joe Cool debates like last night. If you're new to the channel, if you watched the last stream, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So before we get into this, let me go ahead and say hi to the several people we have in the chat already. We've got Here I Am, Hold the Line, Living American, Mojo Shop, and yeah, I think that's what we got so far. Mostly jurists here, actually. So anyway, all right. So, and like I said, feel free to join me. But without further ado, I think one of the best ways to describe the difference between public versus private would be to show you something out of Black's Law Dictionary and explain it, right? Actually, you know, yeah, we'll do that. Okay. So let me share this window. Boom. Oh, that is not the one I wanted. I want this Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Okay. These are all available online. They may be getting increasingly harder to find as AI is cleaning up all of the stuff they don't want people to see. But we have copies in the Jurist Society mega folder as well. So unity in the law of estates, the peculiar characteristic of an estate held by several in joint tenancy, and which is fourfold: unity of interest, unity of title, unity of time, and unity of possession. In other words, joint tenants have one and the same interest, accruing by one and the same conveyance, commencing at one and the same time, and held by one and the same undivided possession. All right, we're going to go through these several definitions, but essentially, so your private property is that which you have absolute dominion over. Okay, that this allodial title. You could truly live in the private in this republic originally, right? Now, when you go out into the public easement, which is called the public easement because it's land that belongs to the people. We're going to get to that in a second. But the word easement itself is the right of one landowner to use another's land for some specific purpose, like say right of way. travel, or a creek for water or something to that effect. And when you think about that, you again, back to the 1A auditors here, I'm talking, well, this is public easement, and I'm allowed to be, you're absolutely right. Okay. But unfortunately, even when you're on your own property, you're a joint tenant. Okay. You are public property, actually. And the state, the individual people of each state are private. They can be private. They are private. But when you sign up to be a 14th Amendment citizen, you're taken under administration, registered as capital stock, right? And you become part of this membership corporation in which you share essentially what could be called joint tenancy. So you have no superior interest in any property than anyone else, and you all share the same interest in all the property that's administered by the United States. And this is how they are slowly but surely taking control of everything without ever letting you know. All right, so unity of season, where a person seized of land which is subject to an easement, profit, appendra of similar right, but also becomes seized of the land to which the easement or other right is annexed. Okay, to become seized of something means to have ownership of it. Okay, so essentially, that's when the easement and the owner that is allowing the easement become one and the same, right? They share interest in each other's lands, and it's unity of season. So I'll use yours, you use mine, right? This is what's interesting when you think about public property. Okay, well, everything essentially is public property except for the very few things that the very wealthy people know how to keep private, because no one knows the difference between private and public anymore. When you're on your property, back when you had allodial title, you could do whatever you wanted as long as you didn't violate anybody's free will, and nobody could come on your property and tell you how to use your property or try to harm you or force you to do anything unwarranted unless you harmed someone in the first place. Now, when you walk off your property and you go into public, you have to conduct yourself by the common law, which means as long as you do not harm anybody and you honor your obligations, you'll be left alone. Now, the government only has very, very limited control over public property originally in the Republic, and no control over private property or jurisdiction whatsoever. And that's very important to understand for tonight's show. And this leads into the LEI, which is ultimately going to lead into Palantir and the new AI digital enslavement system. So the LEI is a legal entity identification, which is public property, right? It signs you up as part of that membership corporation. So all of your data is technically public property, and there is no expectation of privacy. So they can filter it through these AI algorithms and figure out exactly how to manipulate you and how to predict your future behaviors based on all of the data that you freely give them through your social media and text messages, phone calls, emails, and everything else they've been collecting for, say, 30, 40, maybe 50 years, even longer. Who knows how long they've had this technology, right? The Snowden thing was just the tip of the iceberg, right? So let me show you guys a clip real quick that I find interesting. Well, actually, before we get into that, let's hop to, so how did you become public property, right? It's called the Buck Act. Well, first, it's obviously the 14th Amendment. But this is particularly how they expanded their jurisdiction territorially directly to you as public chattel within the states, and allowed the states to essentially become corporate subcontractors of the federal corporation and managing their infant chattel for them. And then they get a cut of a slice of the pie, right? So this guy, he says, a map of the United States of America includes 50 sovereign and independent states who are freely associated together in a union. It does not include the District of Columbia. That is a fact. Which was created by the Constitution of the Union as the legal home of the federal government. That government was intended to be a servant to the Union states, not their master. And of course, the Union states were created to be servants of the people, as proven in Chisholm v. Georgia. All right, so in order for the federal government to tax a citizen of one of the several states, they had to create a contractual nexus. This contractual nexus is called Social Security. This is what we talk about all the time on this channel and prove. The federal government always does everything according to the principles of laws, and they do, believe it or not. People think that the government's lawless sometimes, but generally it sticks to the Constitution and follows the law, right? Principles of law. And that's tough for some people to accept. So when he says contractual nexus, think of a nexus as the meeting point of where they are allowed to create an attachment. So this is what the cop's doing, right? The policy officer, the road pirate, when he pulls you over, he's looking for that account number, right, to create an attachment in order to generate commercial paper. What is commercial paper? It's any debt with security that's guaranteed performance, right, which is what the counties actually get ratings, bond ratings on how well they enforce compliance to the trust indenture. All right, a lot of counties, wealthy counties, have AAA bond ratings. Obviously poorer counties have poorer bond ratings, townships or whatever, right? They all have bond ratings that scores them on how well they're going to be able to enforce compliance to the commercial paper that's generated. And so essentially the trusts that are going to be created, carried out, and then they are going to, what do they call it? It's purchase for value against the trustee is literally what it's called. I've got a legal paper about it. Purchase for value against the trustee. And without notice, essentially. And that's what the cop is doing on behalf of the bankers and the corporate state when he pulls you over. And what are you receiving an attachment for? What is he trying to generate commercial paper for? Violations of the original trust. So it's all based on the original trust, which is the Social Security trust, that you violated this. Now we get to create another trust that has a commercial value that then we can sell on a private institutional market to investors. And if we guarantee compliance, we get top dollar for the commercial paper. So let's continue. In 1935, the federal government instituted Social Security. The Social Security Board then created 10 Social Security districts, a federal area which covered the several states like an overlay. And what I think of is like a clear sheet of glass being laid over all the states. That is federal jurisdiction. All right. The definition of resident in the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code is anyone who resides in this state and establishes that he or she is legally present in the United States. And how do you establish that you're legally present in that clear sheet of glass overlay? By contract, by being entered into a trust indenture. Okay. So I know we go over this all the time. We're going to get into the AI stuff, but there may be new people coming to the channel, and we just have to give a brief overview of these things, unless somebody wants to come up and have a discussion about it. So in 1939, the federal government instituted the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939. That's also when they introduced the Trust Indenture Act. Okay. And it's because they go together. It's because they go together. The Trust Indenture Act is what essentially bonded you to the public debt and makes you responsible for the performance of obligations placed on an estate that's been put under administration. I see we got Fozzie Foster in the chat. Good to see you. Peg's Place showed up. Good to see you as well. Did I miss anybody? May have rolled in here. Catch 22. Good to see you, brother. All right. So the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939, which is a municipal law of the District of Columbia, taxing all federal and state government employees and those who live and work in any federal area. Well, your Social Security number, Social Security itself, is considered a federal deferred retirement benefit. So you are technically an agent of the United States, employed by the United States to engage in commercial enterprise under federal territorial maritime jurisdiction, which I'm going to show you guys a law review that just blatantly states the fact that they blended both civil and common law and equity, actions at law and suits and equity, blended them together, which you cannot do. If anybody's seen the stream, what's the difference between law and equity that I did, that explains the difference between law and equity. Perfect. Equity is not law. Okay. It can deal with something that is in accordance with law, but what equity deals with is essentially prior agreements and trust relationships. Okay. Or in the instance that somebody feels that they have obtained equity through some action of preservation of material, and then they can maybe sue for equitable relief and saying that, oh, this guy wouldn't have this stuff if I didn't save it, so he owes me some money or something. That's like the equitable, but none of that's law. You could never say that at law. You can never say any of those things. So they have nothing to do, because contracts and trust relationships are a fiction, and actual law does not deal with fiction. In fact, the term legal fiction was created, or not the term, but the concept of a legal fiction was created to facilitate these trust indentures created in the feudal system in England, right? And essentially what centuries old jurists would say about legal fiction, say that the legal fiction is used rarely and it serves a specific purpose for achieving some end in court that cannot be achieved without the use of legal fiction, okay, such as establishing that somebody is bound to perform the obligations of another person, which as the trustee of a trust, right, and has failed to perform those obligations, okay? The law cannot recognize those obligations as law, but equity can recognize them as, we can say for the sake of convenience, private law or imaginary law, right? But you're still bound to through the common law of contract, but it has to be adjudicated in equity. Because if I tell you not to drive faster than 55 miles an hour, that's not a law, because there is no victim or violation of free will. Okay, I have to take you to a suit in equity because you violated a contract that we must be in for me to be able to tell you how to use your property. That's a simple way of explaining it. Let's move on. And maybe not so simple for some people, but watch the stream. What is the difference between law and equity if you're confused about that at all? So now the government knows it cannot tax those citizens who live and work outside the territorial jurisdiction of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, or Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. Okay. And that would be the federal executive. Well, no, not federal executive. What is that? I got to look that. But Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 is the commercial, is Congress's commercial jurisdiction. And Congress only has jurisdiction within the 10 square miles of the District of Columbia. That would be why they put a cage around this damn thing. These are called boundary stones. And it shows you on one side, it says jurisdiction of the United States. And that's when you're heading into the District of Columbia. On the other side, it says Maryland, showing you you're going back to common law jurisdiction. It doesn't say jurisdiction of Maryland because they're all under the same common law jurisdiction, all the several states in a confederation. But the jurisdiction of the United States is different, okay? It's maritime admiralty. It has aspects of common law to it, right? But essentially, it's ran by a corporation. Whereas this out here is run by the people in Maryland and the several states. So they established these boundary stones to clearly mark out. And now why would they go through the trouble of doing this? Think about that. And these are still, some of these are still there. Why would they go through the trouble of doing this if it wasn't important? Telling you which is which jurisdiction. Of course it's important. Of course it's important because if Congress can only regulate commerce, government can only regulate commerce or administer property. That's it. They cannot make law. When they legislate, and I hate when the news calls them lawmakers, are lawmakers. They're not fucking lawmakers. They're statute and code makers. Okay? And those things only attain the color of law by consent. Here I am says, that's where we need to build a wall with lasers to keep the lizards with tiny hats bound. Well, yeah, probably. We need to find out where all the underground entrances are as well, you know? And yeah, so anyways, oh, Grouch in the house. What's up, Grouch? All right, let's move on. So in 1940, Congress passed the Buck Act. That would be Title IV USCS 104 through 113, Section 110E. That's the boring stuff, right? But there it is if you want to look it up. This act allowed any department of the federal government to create a federal area for the imposition of the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939. Okay, that's the income tax. The imposition of this tax is at 4 USCS Section 111, and the rest of the taxing laws in Title 26, the Internal Revenue Code. The Social Security Board has already created an overlay of a federal area. So, through the Buck Act, essentially, anyone who has a Social Security number, the federal corporation deems federal personnel, and through the Buck Act, they give the states the authority to enforce the Public Salary Tax Act and then all of the other federal taxes that were placed on these quote-unquote federal personnel within the state's borders, right? Well, what this actually did was made the states essentially a corporate administrative department of the federal corporation, right? I think he says something to this effect. I only skimmed this, and I seen he knew what he was talking about based on what I can prove, and so that's why I chose to present it. And so the federal area, all right, and that's why, like I said, the definition of resident, the Motor Vehicle Code says anyone who resides in this state, meaning Michigan, and establishes that he or she is legally present in the United States. That does two things. It shows a distinction between this state and the United States, which most people on this channel should know that difference. And secondly, it shows that though you are physically in this state, to be a resident, you must establish, which means by contract, right, or presumption of trust relationship, that you are legally present in this United States territorial jurisdiction, period. So, as a result, the federal government created the federal states, which are exactly like the sovereign states, and occupies, hold on a second, I got to, there we go, got to put that on silent. All right, and occupies the same territories and boundaries. So as a result, the federal government created the federal states, which are exactly like the sovereign states and occupies the same territories and boundaries, but whose names are capitalized versions of the sovereign states. Remember that proper names and proper nouns in English have only the first letter capitalized. For example, the federal state of Illinois is overlaid upon the state of Illinois. This is a fact. Further, it is designated by the federal abbreviation IL. And I wonder if he's going to bring up the Zone Improvement Program, which is another layer of federal territorial jurisdiction, also known as zip code. Okay, Zone Improvement Program code. And those are federal territorial jurisdictions. And that's part of what the two-letter symbolic abbreviation, because that's actually just a symbol, right, created by the corporation, instead of the sovereign state abbreviation, which would be ILL, right, and lowercase. Capital I, lowercase ll. So too is Arizona designated AZ instead of the lawful abbreviation of ARIZ, CA. And this is all in the, I believe it's the Oxford Styles Manual. It's in quite a few of the old Styles manuals you can find, and I've shown on this channel before. So, etc. If you ever use two-letter capitalized abbreviation, you are declaring that the location is under the jurisdiction of the federal government instead of the powers of the sovereign state. And who is the power of the sovereign state? The people. The people are. That's Chisholm v. Georgia. That's what I highlight and have shown ad nauseum, right? So I had to shrink it down when I was creating those shorts earlier, but whoops, that is way too far. All right. At the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved upon the people, and they are truly sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, unless African slaves among us may be so called, meaning subjects, and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and joint tenants in the sovereignty. So the reason he says unless African slaves among us may be so called subjects is because they're anyone who is under bond like that, under bondage, is considered chattel property to the law, and they do not actually have access to the law because they're under administration. Essentially, that's what slavery. I mean, but even slavery is like an even worse degree of that, to where you're actually just property. Right, you can't even really consider like administrative law. I mean, I guess you could if you had a whole nation of slaves like you do now, and that's what we're under is administrative law. So it's a very fine line between slavery and a trust indenture, let me tell you, especially when it's done through perpetual debt with no end date like the Federal Reserve note, which is insane. But that's where we're at. So the rest of this says, from the differences existing between feudal sovereignties and governments founded on compacts, meaning the sovereignties of Europe, run by the crown, where everybody basically holds a title or is controlled by somebody who holds a title under the crown to all the land under the crown, the feudalism. Just watch my older streams if you don't know what I'm talking about. I explain it ad nauseum. And governments founded on compacts are governments founded by constitution, which is a contract between the governed and the government. Okay? And in our country, in our republic here in the United States, we are the sovereign and the government is the utility. They're the servant. They cannot bring charges. They're the utility to have a suit brought before the court. And that whole case at common law is run by the jury. And if there be no jury, it's run by the plaintiff. And all the magistrate or justice of the peace is a paper pusher. So it says, from the differences existing between feudal sovereignties and governments founded on compacts, it necessarily follows that their respective prerogatives must differ. Sovereignty is the right to govern a nation, or state sovereign is the person or persons in whom that resides. In Europe, the sovereignty is generally ascribed to the prince. Here, it rests with the people. There, the sovereign actually administers the government. Here, never in a single instance. Our governors are the agents of the people, and at most stand in the same relation to their sovereign, meaning the people, us, in which the regents in Europe stand to their sovereign. So the government stands in the same relationship to us as regents do to the crown. That's how that's actually supposed to work, unless you're federal personnel, unless you're an employee of the corporation and part of that membership corporation. That if you are public property, if you are a joint tenant in commerce, right? So, all right. Their princes have personal powers, dignities, and preeminences. Our rulers have none but official, nor do they partake in the sovereignty otherwise or in any other capacity than as private citizens. So in order for the government or any official in the government to actually be sovereign, because they're actually bound to a term of service for years, right? Technically, they're indentured. They're public officials. They're indentured to the people. In order for them to actually be sovereign again and not be subject to public statutes and all of those things, then they must return to the private life. And look, it's right here, used in 1793. He says they're only sovereign when they're private. So they made you federal personnel to make you public. And now as public property, we're in this data collection era, which I believe they've intended the entire time. There's so much evidence of foreshadowing and knowing what's coming like 40, 50 years down the road. You know, just a small example of decades-long planning would be the creation of the internet and then the immediate surveillance scandals that happened like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then especially going all the way, because you had the Promise software scandal way back when, and we're going to get into some of that tonight. And they found out that basically the intelligence agencies were selling this Promise software, which is data collection and analysis software, way back in, I forget, it was way back in like the 90s, I believe, or it was a long time ago. And I can't remember the exact time, but it was decades ago. And it would analyze this data, right? Of course, much better now, and compile this data, or not necessarily analyze, but it would compile this data for analysis is what I meant. And they would sell this to all the other countries like the CIA, or actually Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, was a huge part of that whole scandal with the Promise software. Surprise, surprise. Here we are again with Maxwell and Epstein and the surveillance state. And all the same shit. It's the same players been behind it the whole time. And it all comes back to the law. It all comes back to the law because they can only do this shit if you are public property. That's it. It's the only way they can do it. There is no expectation of privacy in the public. Well, even worse than being in the public, there is no private for you. You are nothing but public. Everything you do is public. You're public chattel. Okay? You are federal personnel considered technically a public official, really, but not holding an office. You're a public agent, actually, would be a much better way to put that, is you're a public agent. You hold agency. An agency is where you are required, as a trustee of a trust, to perform obligations placed upon you. That's what an agent is. I've got that the restatement of contracts second, when they were reframing the government under it was called the restatement of contracts. Look it up. I have them. Maybe I'll do an episode on that. Actually, I probably should. And this an agency, that's what you're doing. You are charged with carrying out some duty on behalf of a principal, right? You have principal and agent is the same thing as executor and trustee, right? Two different ways to say the same or a similar relationship. So you're a public agent with a social security number. All right, let's get back to the Buck Act for a moment, and then we'll move on. Because I don't want to beat a dead horse, right? He wants to do that. So, as a result of creating these shadow states, the federal government assumes that every area is federal area, and that the citizens therein are federal citizens. For USCS Section 110D, the term state includes any territory or possession of the United States. For USCS Section 110E, the term federal area means any lands or premises held or acquired by or for the use of the United States or any department, establishment, or agency. That is what a United States citizen is an agent to the United States. And the agent is charged with carrying out the obligations that the principal places upon them of the United States. So you are an agent, and so you are in a federal area when you claim a zip code and social security number and driver's license and registration, all that. Any federal area or any part thereof which is located within the exterior boundaries of any state shall be deemed to be a federal area located within each state or within such state. So let's see what you guys have to say over here, because I don't want to ignore you. All right, so wow, you guys are definitely all right. Where was the last comment I seen? That's funny. Speedworth. Gender wars, making everyone demand that gender can't be changed. So once we are a silicon, we're stuck at that. Gender, but it cannot be changed. You don't have to demand that. That doesn't make any sense, but I guess I kind of get, maybe you're making a joke. Anyways, I seen Here I Am said something that was, could one ask the judge if they have signed a copy of their birth certificate and social security card in order to prove their jurisdictional contract? I have never signed either one. Well, so no, because you use them though. So therefore that's tacit agreement, right? I know that the social security card, itself says not valid unless signed, but they're just going to claim tacit agreement by the use of it through employment or collection of, I think, didn't you tell me you collect some form of disability, right? So that right there, through the collection of disability, is essentially a tacit agreement to the social security trust indenture. Unfortunately, right? If it were so, see, that's why we used to have seals. That's the exact reason why we in the Jurist Society do have seals, and we do not sign anything without sealing it. And if something is signed without the seal, then it's not valid at law, right? And there's a publication on the record that states this and makes it explicit, and it's on public record. I have mine on public record. It's called Declaration, Establishment, Publication of House Seal. And then you have your declaration of claim, which is where you claim your estate, and you seal that. You seal both of them, obviously. But the reason the seal is so important is exactly what you're saying. You cannot presume my agreement to do anything without my seal. All right. So then, especially if something says valid unless signed. Now, if you were handed something that is a performance contract, where if you do this, then you agree to this, that's totally different. But it says explicitly on the back, not valid unless signed. So I get where you're coming from, and it's a good question. Let's see here. So they claim you're an employee but have never paid you minimum wage. No, they don't. It's not necessarily that you're an employee. I know I've used that term before, but it's that you're an agent. It's essentially that you're an agent to the United States, which is essentially the same as being a trustee under administration. There's two ways to say the same thing. Just one's contract law, the other one's trust law, right? And the two are very similar and interrelated, yet for some reason separated a little bit. But it's at least a contract places you in a trust, right? So there you go. But you can also contract to be an agent, to be a principal, which is essentially just the same thing, without certain advantages of a trust, I guess. Or you could just say that that's where it's so loose and fluid, trust law. That's why they love using trust law, because it lets them it's all imaginary. It just lets them make up whatever kind. So we're going to make up these rules according to these fundamental common law principles that are immutable. So we'll take and twist these and manipulate these to make up these rules to basically write roles for people and essentially create law, usurp the authority of God, right? So they're like playwrights. And when you think about it, it's kind of funny that they are like playwrights, because actors and politicians are pretty much the same thing. Look at all the actors that are in the CIA. I'm not saying that they're the same as playwrights. What I'm saying is that they perform the same function in two different sides of the coin. You know, one's entertainment, manipulation through your attention, right? And the other side is, we got Ryan McVeigh. What's up, man? I didn't see you. And you've got the other one is obviously the same thing. It's manipulation of your perception through their performative acting on the stage. That's what politicians are. They're two sides of the same coin. Well, then you also have these playwrights. You have the playwrights that manipulate your perception through your entertainment, and you have the playwrights that manipulate your perception through politics. And those are called legislators, and politicians. But they manipulate your behavior through legislation, would be a better way to put it. So they manipulate your behavior through legislation, manipulate your perception through entertainment, right? And then also through politics. So it's almost like Hollywood is another part of the executive branch, if you could really think about it, or it's another part of the government, rather, not executive. So anyways, there is no reasonable doubt that the federal state is imposing directly an excise tax under the provisions of 4 USCS Section 105, which states in the pertinent part, Section 105, state and so forth, taxation affecting federal areas, sales and tax. A, no person shall be relieved from liability for payment of, collection of, or accounting for any sales or use tax levied by any state or any duly constituted taxing authority herein, having jurisdiction to levy such tax on the ground that the sale or use with respect to which tax is levied occurred in whole or in part within a federal area and such state. So they're saying that nobody shall be relieved from taxes in a federal area, even if that federal area is in the state. And so what they did was they made all the states just one big federal area with several jurisdictional overlays, so and such state or taxing authority shall have full jurisdiction and power to levy and collect any such tax in any federal area within such state to the same extent and with the same effect as though such area were not a federal area, right? It's crazy. So that's how they finished usurping the sovereignty of the states by usurping not only, by absolutely usurping the citizenry thereof, because the state sovereignty is only there because the people of the state are sovereign. So they usurp the people of the state, the sovereignty of the people of the state, and then cut the state in on administering and regulating you and taxing you, so that the state is a complicit part of it, which they were the entire time. If you've been a long time subscriber to this channel, I've explained that many times. Irrespective of what tax is called by state law, if its purpose is to produce revenue, it is income tax or receipts tax under the Buck Act, right? So irrespective of what tax is called by state law, if its purpose is to produce revenue, it is income tax or receipts tax under the Buck Act, which would include property taxes, because everyone's joint tenants, right? all people are joint tenants having no greater interest than the other in all the property that's administered by the United States, because you're an agent to the United States. As far as the only courts left are courts of there are no courts of law to question the contract other than the Federal Court of Claims. And so when you go into these nisi prius prior agreement courts, right, you're trying to argue out of a contract, the validity of a contract, and they only want to determine whether or not you followed the contract. They're not going to question the foundation of their court hearing. And so that's why you challenge jurisdiction. You challenge the validity of the contract by challenging jurisdiction and get them to admit it. And that's done by asking questions, but that's not the point of tonight's show. So that is the Buck Act, right? Let me see here. Then I wanted to get into, so essentially what's been done is you've been placed into a trust. One of the ways out of this is to place your property into an express trust after you've claimed your estate. The reason being is because the common law of contracts must be abided by. So this is Weiss Concise Trustee Handbook. This is an awesome book. It's written by a lawyer who was hired by corporations to deal with people like us in the truth community, essentially, that were causing corporations and banks and stuff problems. Well, after he was done doing that, he wrote this book, A Guide to the Administration of an Express Trust Under the Common Law Functioning Under the General Law Merchant by Carlton Albert Weiss. Fantastic book. And essentially, he has some good points that he's like, okay, so all the cases I've come across over all the years, this is what they didn't realize, was that they're operating under the general law merchant, which is accepted by the common law, right? Because it's that you enter into the general law merchant through the common law of contracts, essentially. And the common law, or the general law merchant, is essentially the common law of merchants, right? So the two are nexused at a contract and then branch off depending on whether or not the contract ends or it was satisfied, whatever happens, the obligations have been discharged, so on and so forth. So, I believe I've seen Carol with a K in here, International Truth Expo. Hey, good to see you, Carol. Good to see you. I was like, yeah, thought I seen you. All right, so what he says here is, and this is a good point, right? So he says, the general law merchant is embraced under general common law, i.e. the original unique system of commercial law in the American states, in which there is no commerce regulation of express trusts except in connection with income derived from corporate stock and physical franchises under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 and 3 of the Constitution. It was strongly held, the strongly held belief of U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Warren E. Burger that 75 to 90% of all trial lawyers were either incompetent, dishonest, or both. So what you've got to do is they have this huge jurisdictional overlay. And what you've got to do is you've got to pull yourself back into the private by creating a private express trust. And now something that I've been thinking about, and I'm going to bring this up to the Jurist Society, we should start working on this, is how to is to come up with an idea of putting our data in a trust, of writing up a common law, a private express trust regarding our data and the use of our data, right? Because we need to take our data out of the public and put it in the private. The reason that this may work is because of this down here. Not there. Oh, something I want to show you as a side note. Of his own right. Where did I see that? Was that here? No. Okay, maybe down here. Yeah, I don't remember that, but it's basically that you're able to manage the affairs of your state and that you're not incompetent, meaning you're not under administration. So you're not by somebody else's right, you're of your own right. All these things we use in common in our common conversations that we don't even realize stem from the law and linguistic remnants of the law being part of everyday conversation in society in English language, and particularly in this country, like say, just in case. Just in case. That it means just in case. We should do this to be just in case. If this case happens, we want to be just, let's do this so that there's no suit, so there's no injury. It's trippy, right? So, here it is. This is defined as of his own right, not under any legal disability or power of another or guardianship, having capacity to manage one's own affair, not under legal disability to act for oneself. Black's Law Dictionary, page 1135, first edition, 1891. So, let me see. I was going to show you guys. All right. So the reason that, like I was talking about, policing our data in a private express trust, we want to take it out of the public, put it into the private, because there is no expectation of public or privacy in public. But as a federal agent, as an agency of the United States, and as a essentially federal personnel, right, through the Social Security trust indenture, having no access to property, you have no property rights, right? Because all your property's been mortgaged to secure the public debt, 1933. You're in the public at all times, whether you believe it or not, or whether you know it or not, you are. And so the court held, and that's how they've only pushed it as far as they could without causing us to use, our second. They push as far as they can without us getting, because they know that ultimately we have the superior force right now until they get their AI together with the facial recognitions and the algorithms that are going to analyze and find the dissenters. And this is all linked to your LEI, right? So the private express trust, it says that it's upheld by the Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. The court held that the express trust is a contractual relationship based on trust form in Smith v. Morse. It was held that any law or procedure in its operation denying or obstructing contract rights impairs the contractual obligation and is therefore violative of Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution essentially says, in a nutshell, that no state shall make any law ex post facto that impairs the performance of obligations of contracts. So that means that your common law contract supersedes your private express trust from common law contract that you do not need government permission for. You do not need, that's common knowledge among trust lawyers, is you do not need to register the trust. Or now they want the trustee to register, some states, and some states they'll try to be like, well, if the trustee doesn't register, the trust doesn't have to register, but the trustee doesn't. If he doesn't, we can penalize the trustee, but it still doesn't invalidate the trust, which is crazy. But that's just because they want to have some sort of contractual nexus through the registration to be able to affect that trust, because they know they cannot affect the private trust itself. And that's why they do that. And that's just in some states. And you can just tell them to fuck off because of these Supreme Court decisions. But here's an example of how this would work. And my logic, right, is driving is a commercial activity. Motor vehicle is a commercial, driver is one employed to, conduct a coach or carriage, on behalf of another. So technically the state should be paying you for having a driver's license. That's the truth. They should be, because you're one employed. That's what a driver is by definition, by lawful definition, or legal definition rather. And motor vehicle is only used for commercial purposes. Right. And it goes on and on and on. Everything's the regulation of commerce. So Congress can have jurisdiction. It has to be commercial. Under Article 1, Section 8, it has to be commercial. So if you take your conveyance, you call it, not a motor vehicle, I would call it a conveyance, which means a movement, a means of movement, right? Or a way of moving, right? You put it in the trust, and part of the trust contract, the contract that creates the trust, it says that this property is not to be used for commercial purposes under any circumstances whatsoever. And then when you get pulled over and the car's in a trust, you don't have to disclose the trust itself to the state or anybody, but the car is in the trust, and enforcement of any commercial regulation of that property and forcing you to put commercial advertising, aka license plate, or have employment as a commercial driver or driver, in general, because that's commercial, would be a violation of your private common law contract. And it would be a violation of Article 1, Section 10. And this has been upheld. Barry v. McCourt, Smith v. Morse, Elliott v. Freeman, over and over and over and over again, right? And that's what this whole book's about. It's a fantastic book. We are actually going over it on the next Jurist Society as well. So I've been reading it quite a bit. It's quite insightful into the common law trust, is what you can call it. You see, it gets confusing a little bit for people because they don't know the difference between law and equity. And I'm not going to try to confuse everybody, but a trust can never be adjudicated at law because a trust is imaginary and all the relationships are just made up by men. So it's not actually law. But you enter into the trust, the private express trust, via common law. Well, really, you enter into, in this country, you've entered into any trust via common law. A Social Security trust, you sign that contract. The common law of contract says you're now an indentured federal agent or federal personnel, an infant under administration. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. But here is another way that they've caused this public trust to happen, to where they can do whatever they want with your data. Is look, so effective in here, let me zoom in, and this is Northwestern Journal of International Law and Business, Volume 5, issued 1 in the spring 1983. Equity and Admiralty: A Turbulent Path to Manifest Destiny. Okay, now members of the Jurist Society who may be in here will understand how damning this is of evidence. But of course, in the 80s, there were still many people who knew about common law. Common law was really finally gotten rid of between the, I'd say, 40s and 60s, right? That's when they didn't get rid of it. They basically removed everyone's access to it by taking control of all property ownership, basically, by taking all property under administration and regulating it. No one has an actual common law right to their property anymore, because you're only the trustee of your estate. So you only have an equitable interest in the property determined by contract, the contract that's attached to the property, because the property is being held as collateral for the public debt. And if you're new here, I always go over it at least once if I can, but that's right here. March 9th, 1933, page 83, second paragraph on the bottom, right? Or on the left-hand side, says the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it's backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people of the nation. So they settled your estate. They mortgaged your estate, right? You got fiduciary foundations of administrative law, another UCLA law review, where they're telling you that the fiduciary model in administrative law posits that administrative agencies like the DMV, right, IRS, are endowed with authority to set regulatory, meaning over the property held in trust as collateral for the debt via 1933 back here, right, via this property that's been mortgaged. Now they can regulate this property, right, and set regulatory policy. And when you violate the policy, that allows them to create an attachment to your trust estate or your to your Social Security trust and generate commercial paper, which is debt tied to obligations, right, that are secured by the Social Security trust. That's what commercial paper is, right, in this country right now. And so that's the point. And so they set this regulatory policy, like speed limits and license, all the licensing regulations, registration, all that stuff. And when you violate it, they want you to, because then they get to fleece you. And it's essentially, they create an attachment like planting a seed to farm securities, to grow securities out of your trust, basically to draw value from your future productive value that's been pledged and keep it for themselves. And so what they do is they generate these securities and they sell it to private institutional investors, right? So set regulatory policy when Congress and the president acting jointly as proxy settlers for the sovereign people. Okay, and the reason I bring this up is this is showing you that the Congress and the president settled your estate, right? Settlement is dealing with estates, right? And in this sense, it is. And what they're talking about to create a fiduciary model of administrative law, it would have to do with estates. And he's talking about settlement of the estates, because when you read this, it says the mortgage of the homes and all the other property of all the people in the nation. Whether you're just like, oh, that's just the homes and the people of 1930. No, as long as a Federal Reserve note is in existence, there is a perpetual lien on the estates of all 14th Amendment citizens, meaning they are only ever trustees of their property, holding the property in trust because it's being used as collateral. And part of that deal or part of the law of mortgages is that the lender gets beneficial use of the property, gets the rents and profits from the property while the loan's outstanding. Well, that's what the generating the securities is all about, and the regulating the property while it's under administration. They're regulating it so they can farm it, and it's literally called farming. The definition of farm is a taxable district leased for revenue. And that's a fact. I'll show you guys real quick. So we'll go to farm. Actually, we'll just look it up here. Farm. So let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. All right, so farm. The system of leasing out the rights of collecting and retaining taxes in a certain district. B, a district so leased. Those are farms, right? Let's see here. We got another one. It says fixed sum paid by an individual or group for the right of collecting and retaining taxes, rents, etc. Collecting revenue, right? Generating revenue. That's what the regulation of property is all about. And they can only do that if it's held in trust. And it's held in trust as long as there's Federal Reserve notes and you're a 14th Amendment citizen. One of those two things has to go away. The leasing of a source of revenue to an individual or group. That's called farming. That's a farm, right? Go down, government. To collect monies due to retain profits from a tax district, business, etc. for a specified period on a payment of sum or sums. That's a farm. That's farming, right? And that's what they're doing. They're farming you for value. They're farming you for securities. And they're literally doing it. And the road pirates, the policy enforcement officers, they're the farmers. They're the farmers. They go out, well, now let's say they're the ones who till the fields. As they go out there, they create an attachment to the estate for a violation of said regulatory policy, right? Right here. Said regulatory policy. And then with that attachment to your Social Security, so they want your driver's license numbers attached to your Social Security. Your Social Security represents your future productive value. That is the trust that was created as a result of the mortgage of your estate. And so now they get to draw on what's already been loaned to the government, but they don't actually take the money out, because just like the way that, like, say, Tesla or Elon Musk owns a shit ton of Tesla stocks, he doesn't even ever use money. He doesn't ever use any of the money he makes. What he does is he borrows money against his stock and then uses that money to reinvest it. And if anything happens, he's never out anything. So no money ever actually goes in, because there is no money, right? It's all just debt securities. But what they do is they create these attachments against the original trust to create a new trust, and then draw value off that and use it, because what they've done is they've made debt currency. And so as long as they can create a contractual obligation, right, where the performance is guaranteed with a financial value, they've just made money, like literally created money out of thin air. But it's not actually money. They created currency out of thin air. And then now out of that trust, security, other securities can be drawn. And that's what the whole scheme is. It's just drawing security off security. And I know this is way above a lot. Like, it takes some time to really see the system the way it is, because you have to study and learn. You also have to learn how money works and the law of money and banking and all that, and understand what debt securities are and how debt securities affect law or affect property, or even can affect your behavior when you're under contract and you are now indentured. So you're public property. So you get to be administered and regulated as property. So now where you would ordinarily be free to do whatever you wanted as long as you didn't hurt anybody at law and common law, now you're regulated as property and you can't violate that trust that you are a part of, because your own body is part of the trust, part of the Social Security trust. Your own body is. So they regulate that as property because that's what creates the productive value for the corporate state. So acting jointly as proxy settlers. And just to show you, this is what settlement means. Settlement, the conveyance of an estate for the benefit of some person or persons. So they conveyed, meaning gave your estate to the banks, right? Mortgaged your estate to the banks for the government's benefit, essentially, because you are dead or missing. Well, originally it was for the benefit of the pauper infant citizen. And that's why, like, originally Social Security cards and birth certificates and stuff had lowercase letters on them. But as they increased the indenture, increased the regulatory policies, and increased the debt, you became increasingly dead to the law till, like I said, between the 40s and the 70s, they barred access to law for everybody under administration, because now you're presumed dead to the law. And the only thing that matters is the corporate state as the beneficiary to take care of its enfranchisements. And so it appropriates money against your sweat equity. That's what Congress does when they do a spending bill. They're appropriating money against your sweat equity, against your productive value, for the benefit of the corporation as a whole. And you see how loosely they define benefit of the corporation as a whole. It's pretty nuts, right? So anyway, back to this thing, which the jurist members will find most interesting, and probably a lot of other people watching. But I know you have to really understand what this means right here initially. So it says, effective in 1966, the federal rules of civil procedure were amended to effect unification of civil and admiralty procedure. Now, what's interesting about that is because civil and admiralty were separate. This is all territorial. It's like military. It's Roman military law is what it is. So you had the admiralty for the soldiers in the wartime situations. Then you had civilian law for those who were just civilians in occupied territory. And that's what's going on here. But they unified it both. So now they can basically just make everything, blur the lines between civil and military law, essentially, and international law. Right. And this is all done for the United Nations and the Vatican, by the way. That's why they wanted to unify civil and admiralty, because admiralty is international law, essentially under the Pope. Right. And that's what that is. So it's funny because I seen this Ghislaine Maxwell, and I can't remember if I saved the thing, and I'm not going to waste time looking for it. But Ghislaine Maxwell, when she was being deposed, she said, are you a citizen or what country are you a citizen of? She said, I'm a citizen of Great Britain or UK or whatever she said. And they said, are you a citizen of any other nation? And she said, I'm a citizen of Terra Mar. I said, what, Terra Mar? I thought that was your company. And she said, and they didn't really go into detail about that in the deposition, but she did claim to be a citizen of Terra Mar, and people found that interesting. And Terra Mar is Richard Branson's part of it. All the wealthiest people are part of it. And what it is it's a trust organization that was created by the world's most powerful people, including, Robert Maxwell, the Maxwells, and like I said, Richard Branson, and I bet the Rothschilds are in there. You can look up the whole roster of the founding members. And what it is, it's a huge trust that covers the entire sea, which everyone knows this realm is mostly sea, covers the entire sea, and it cordons off each section of the sea to be placed under or be placed in trust for each individual member of Terra Mar to maintain it for its benefit. Again, so they placed the sea under administration. So technically it sounds like what she's saying, and what Terra Mar is almost like international waters under administration. And it was created by the world's most wealthiest people. And if you know who's behind the Maxwells and you know who's behind them, it still all goes back to the Pope. All right, so you have Maxwell, small hat, Pope, in that order. So anyway, And it's not even necessarily Pope, it's just the Holy See. And whatever demonic entity probably runs that, I'm not sure, right? But can rest assured, probably is, because they set up this entire system. This whole system all started with one papal bull, Unum Sanctum. Well, actually, it started in 1066 with William the Conqueror, who brought Roman civil law to England. But then the spreading it as a net over the whole world started with the first papal bull, Unum Sanctum, right? Then you had Attorney Regis and Dum Diversus, or Doctrine of Discovery, where they're like, go out and conquer all the lands in the name of God and convert or kill the heathens and settle the lands. Is basically to take control, which was laid out in Unum Sanctum, of all the property on earth, all the souls on earth, everything. And that's what they're doing now. They're reaping souls. They're harvesting souls. Well, they've already harvested souls. I mean, the IRS logo is literally a grim reaper holding a pair of scales, right? Or Saturn, because death is Saturn, is Father Time, is Kronos. It's all that. It's all the same character, and you guys got to know your symbolism. Again, you got to know your essentially your pantheons, because that's what these people, this is what they live by. They understand these as archetypal forces, and that Saturnian force that runs government, right, is the bipolar force that controls this realm. But I'm not going to get into all that crap, okay? But this does go that deep. It really does. It really, really, really does. So, effective in 1966, the rules of civil procedure were amended to affect the unification of civil and admiralty procedure. Insane, right? With this amendment, the advisory committee intended that just as in the 1938 rules abolished the distinction between actions at law and suits in equity. That's crazy. That's crazy, because equity is specifically for the enforcement of contracts and trust arrangements and the like, right? Things that could never be enforced at law. So what they did was they actually barred you from being able to enforce anything against them at law by blending those two jurisdictions. And the only way they could do that was by making sure you had no access to law by taking control of your property. Okay, so one more thing I want to show. Well, we'll get into this a little bit. Why not? This was an interesting little thing I came across. I do not read Latin. I do not know what he's showing there. But immediately he starts out with things that I can prove. So I thought I would show you guys, because I prove it all the time. And I'm sure many of you that watch frequently will agree. But let me check some of your comments first real quick. So, see, when I went on disability pension, they were asking me a lot about being in a trust, or am I a trustee? I didn't understand what they were talking about. Well, now you probably understand a little bit better, huh? Yeah. So they wanted to know if you're part of probably a separate trust or a private express trust, right? Or anything that would affect their relationship with you, right? And their ability to enforce the Social Security trust upon you. Farm Act of 1940, yes, but it all started with the federal, well, it didn't start with, but they started the farming process with the Federal Farm Loan Act of 1916, which created 12 land bank districts, which later became the Federal Reserve districts, but they're the farming districts, the taxable districts, where they basically took everybody as cattle, as public chattel. And I mean, that's actually, so think about this, capitalism, right? Everybody's like, we're supposed to be free market, but capitalism, kaput. Capitalism comes from the word kaput. Kaput means literally head in Latin. And so it's called capitalism because they take and warehouse you, right? In these tax plantations, like heads of cattle, and then borrow against your productive value. Like in the same way a farmer could take and make a warehouse receipt for all the cattle he has in his barn and take that to the bank as a negotiable instrument and obtain a loan in exchange for that negotiable instrument. It's called a warehouse receipt. The birth certificate is kind of like a warehouse receipt. It's a settlement certificate, a warehouse receipt, and represents the splitting of your title all in one, right? So anybody who wants to come up and have a conversation, by the way, feel free. Trump making the CBDC lawful and owning it, isn't that treason by violating Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5? No. Well, no, not really, because he's basically building on the loose interpretations. It is treason. Okay, let's put it simply. It is fucking treason. But so is creating the Federal Reserve. The Constitution the federal government has no power that was not delegated to it by the states through the Constitution. Okay, has no power that's not specifically stated in there. See, everybody thinks that they're supposed to use the Constitution for themselves. No, you use the Constitution to enforce restrictions on the government. And the people failed to do that when the Federal Reserve was created, because nowhere in the Constitution says that Congress shall have the power to create currency, right? But it says nowhere that Congress has the power to delegate that power to a private third-party banking cartel to usurp the sovereignty of the people ultimately. And that was treason in the first place. So basically he's just building off that, because that Marbury versus Madison and several other cases, people have the incorrect assumption that the Supreme Court can determine if something is constitutional or not, which is ridiculous in that case right there. So the Constitution created the Supreme Court. How could something that was created the creation of something determine the validity of the creator? That makes no sense. That's like you determining whether or not God is doing the right thing. It's dumb. And that was evidenced quite obviously when the Federal Reserve was created, because the Supreme Court's like, they can do it. Oh, well, the Supreme Court said it was constitutional. So, so actually it wasn't with the Federal Reserve. It was with the first central bank. I think it was called the first bank of North America, I want to say, or first bank of the United States, because there's one while we were still a colony, and that failed because people were smart and knew what the banking system was trying to do to them. And then there was one established after we became sovereign. And that was called, I believe that one was the first Bank of the United States. It was given a 20-year charter from 1791 to 1811. And when that 20-year charter was up, the people, because they knew what the banking system was trying to do, they heeded Thomas Jefferson's warning that that debt is the greatest threat to the nation, and that the central banking system is the greatest enemy in the nation. I'm basically summarizing it, but that's what Thomas Jefferson was very, very adamant, that people understood how dangerous a central bank was to our republic. And people knew that around that time. So when the charter was up in 1811, they went before Congress and said, so you're going to renew that charter? And Congress like, no, we're good. We'll take it from here. We've gotten out of the Revolutionary War debt enough. We'll take it from here and become profitable. And they didn't like that answer, obviously, the banks. And so Nathan Rothschild basically sent an armada over here, and that was the War of 1811, and also had Canada attack and all that other good stuff. Basically anywhere they had British soldiers to be able to attack us for not renewing the charter. And that's why the War of 1812 is the shortest chapter at least in my elementary school, which is when they taught, because they want to teach you when you're not really going to be able to understand what you're being taught or remember it, because you're not going to care what you're being taught. So you're taught about the War of 1812, and you would say probably like 4th, 5th grade. And I remember it was the shortest chapter in the history book. And I remember that because I was happy about it, because I just wanted to get the fuck out of school and go play, do stuff. That's why they taught you that then. So you didn't know that that was a central bankers war. All wars are central bankers war, right? And so the president who actually kicked the bank out because they did renew the charter, that's how the war ended, or, obviously, but they're not going to overtly say that. But all of a sudden we renewed the charter after the war ended. And then Andrew Jackson, who was a soldier during that war, President Andrew Jackson, he was a young officer, and he was captured, held as a POW, tortured, and lost a lot of his direct family due to that war. He hated the British and he hated the central banks. So he dedicated his presidential campaigns to removing the central banks, or the central bank and all of its agents, from our republic. And he succeeded after 2 terms in an assassination attempt. And after that, we actually became profitable. He introduced a tariff program. That's why Trump is like, I'm going to do tariffs, because the last time we did tariffs, after Jackson, and especially after 1870, of course, when the 14th Amendment was instituted and all, that's where they're going to go back with that, because they don't want to let you know about why we were profitable. It was because we got rid of the central banking system under Jackson. So they're going to skip over that. But he did have a portrait of Jackson in the Oval Office. Anyway, so Jackson instituted that tariff program. That tariff actually put us in a surplus. And we were in a surplus all the way till the Civil War, meaning we were not in debt. Can you imagine not being in debt, a country not being in debt? Nobody can imagine a country not being in debt right now. Nobody can imagine that. Well, the last person who could imagine that was Muammar Gaddafi. And well, we see what happened to him. What did Hillary Clinton say? We came, we saw, he died. Yeah, because that country was actually profitable. It wasn't enslaved by the central banking system. So, all right, let me continue. Anti-whiteism ends with you says, what about post-founding states that were still territories? Yes, so they did have jurisdiction, but they were still under common law. That's explicitly stated right in the first section of the Northwest Ordinance, that people had the absolute right to property and they had the absolute right to common law. I've shown that on the show several times. And then also when they became states, they were brought in under the doctrine of equal footing, meaning they were brought in, even though it may have been 50, 60 years after the first states, they still were subject to the same and had the same rights and restrictions that the government had the same restrictions and the people had the same rights that the original 13 states did. So hopefully that answers your question. I thought Trump was making a money backed by gold. Crypto was an option. Well, it would be gold securities, though. It'd just be representing an interest in gold, which is not the same thing as gold. The whole thing's still kind of built on a securities system, but it's attached to it because the fiat system is the monetary system right now. So it has to be attached to that for liquidity, meaning because not everybody uses crypto, they have to still be attached to the debt currency system for people to take their crypto and make it liquid to invest in something outside of crypto, because crypto is not the worldwide currency at this point. But the one thing about crypto, well, it's primarily given value by data. Now, this is a double-edged sword, right? Because that's what we're talking about on this show, is that they have the right to use your data against you because you are public property and there is no expectation of privacy in public. So you have to remove yourself from the public into the private, which is why I want to look into seeing how we could remove our data into a private express trust and put that on the record, right? Why not? But I have to think about exactly how to word that. That's going to take some time. However, that's why they can use your data, and that data is what gives cryptocurrency value. And that data is intrinsically valuable because it's in demand. It is valuable because it gives power to these corporations to manipulate you and control your behavior and predict your behavior, right? And it secures the government's dominance. It does. Okay, that's what the data does. And the crypto is a currency just built off that's helping build the data network. Well, essentially, right? That's a very vague and general, because there's many different cryptos that do many different things and aspects of it. And some of them are just tokens representing something in a video game. I mean, it's really quite Wild West with that whole thing right now. But that's the essential point. And no, because it has an intrinsic value, meaning people want it for something other than the fact that it represents the debt of somebody else, and they now can control that and generate more securities from that debt and obligations, right? And control the behavior and the use of property and all that. So that's what gives these debt securities value. But what gives the cryptocurrency value is actual tangible power. You know what I mean? Oh, we got Jeff joining us, a fellow jurist. Let's bring him up. How you doing tonight, Jeff?
Just a second. Let me get the other one dead.
Hold on. Are you far away
Okay, there now. No, I had YouTube on.
Okay, there we go.
You know,
All right.
you got into the data thing. There's I forget who I was listening to today, but he was talking about Gab AI. Said it is based, baby. So I'm gonna check that out. But okay, the whole data thing and AI controlling it, is it which who are they going to be? They're going to be believe Grok or Gab or which one
Palantir.
is going to be the authority?
Palantir.
Palantir.
100%. They've already been given all that. They were like one of the most expensive AI portions of the big beautiful bill.
What are they going to do with the rest of them? Just use them as
well, they're all
like Facebook or something.
Interconnected. See, that's the whole thing. They're all interconnected. You're asking which one is going to be like the top dog. I think it's going to be Palantir is going to be the top dog AI company, because they are right now pretty much. I mean, they have created a way to target and eliminate people using AI already. I don't know if you've seen anything on that controversy, but yeah, that's the case. I think it's going to be Palantir, and I'm actually going to get into that. And just after I was going to show this a little bit, then I definitely want to get into. I've pulled up some interesting stuff on Palantir and Pegasus and Prism.
Pegasus is that Israeli software stuff, right?
Yeah, but it's pretty interesting. It tracks and collects. Basically, it's like a Trojan horse that's in everybody's phone and everybody's technology, just constantly collecting data through a back door, right? And that's its primary function. Then you've got like Prism, which is just like how a white light goes into a prism and is refracted in the 7 colors of the rainbow. The data goes through Prism and is refracted into manageable and usable data sets that the AI then takes and analyzes to figure out how to predict your behavior and manipulate your behavior. So, and or to target and eliminate you, right?
Yeah,
we're going to get into that stuff. But this
like
guy,
a whole nother Bible to me.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's quite deep. And it is happening, and it's all tied to the LEI, and that's what it's. So it's all tied to the LEI. So the AI has to interface with the LEI because you have to have a name. When they ask you, when the court asks you, state your name for the record. One of the things that I've always wanted to say, but I have not. I usually say I come before the court, haven't been found to be living, sole heir and executor of the res defendant estate, and I'm here to clear up this confusion because this property is not under administration, right? And then let him go from there, and then I start asking questions. Well, another thing I wanted to ask is, state your name for the record. What makes you presume I have one?
Yeah.
Why do I have to have a name to be living? Just because I'm living, I have it. You know what I mean?
Why do I have to or that smart ass guy there, that what is not my name. I like that one too.
No, but well, yeah, that was funny. But what I mean is, it's so much deeper.
Right. Yeah.
Why do I have to have a name to be living? Oh, no, because they need to be able to control you. And they do that through. So before the introduction of birth certificates in this republic, or any kind of record of birth and creation of a legal entity, your birth was just recorded in the family Bible, and that was acceptable at law. You could just have people witness that you were, who you said you were, and that was acceptable at law. And that would never even be a question except in very special circumstances, because it was nobody's business who you are, because you're private. Sovereigns are private. Okay? They can operate in the public, but they are private. They choose to operate in public, and then they go back to private, right? Where the United States citizen is always public because it's an agent to the United States. It is public property. Yeah. And so because of that, right? Well, the way that they did that was by creating the legal entity identification, which started with the registration of birth, which not only conveys the controlling interest of your estate through registration. Regis, meaning crown, means to give to the crown. Registration. It conveys the controlling interest, just like the Doomsday Book in 1066. It's how that king got control of the land and then gifted it back out under title, and that created feudalism. The registration of the birth certificate conveys the controlling interest, but it also creates a title to the estate. And think about the word title. When we talk about title, you're naming the thing, which gives the person naming it, giving it a title, right? Naming it, power over that thing. It's even in the Bible. He gave Adam the authority to name all the animals. Well, if the government names you, you're an animal. It goes that way. That's what it is. And that's the root of the LEI. And the AI can only interface with the LEI because it has to also be able to connect to an account for enforcement. I mean, it can only interface with the LEI for governance, control, and data collection because it has to have a legal entity to attach everything it's doing to. And that is a fiction because it's just a construct of the mind and an entity on paper. But you, as a trustee of the trust, as a U.S. citizen, all caps name, an indentured, right? That's not you. That is your persona that they expect you to adopt when they compel you to perform. But it's not you.
Right.
Okay. What makes you presume I have a name? And that's the question. Would I be any less alive or able to enjoy my natural rights to life, liberty, property, to be able to secure those things and the right to contract? Would I be any less able to do those things if I did not have a name? Absolutely not. And like I said, at common law, under the original republic, that was nobody's business unless you chose to make it somebody's business. That's how it works, right? So let's see what this guy's got to say about it. He says, set decay trust. We know what that is. By what right do you live? Or the measure, the trust by one's, the trust by way an estate is measured or whatever, however. But what it essentially is a living trust created for the benefit of someone or something, some entity, right? And the trust itself is its own entity. So technically, when you're being brought into court, it's your estate bringing you into court to compel you to answer for your misuse of property under administration, because the estate is controlled by the United States. It's the estate that is the United States citizen. It is the estate that is the agent of the United States, and you are the trustee of that estate. So
you're responsible for how it's managed. Yeah.
Right. So let's see here. He says, straw man, common term in the United States of America or Canada. The legal fiction is a construct on paper, an estate in trust. When you are in, and that's a fact, that's what I literally just explained for the last 5 minutes. The legal fiction is a construct on paper, an estate in trust, right? And being administered by the federal corporation, which is being administered by the crown, which is being administered by the Holy See, right? When you are in receipt of a bill or summons in court, it is always in capital letters, similar to tombstones and graveyards. Capital letters signify death. They do. Yes.
They non-living.
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 Yep. Non-living. Exactly. Dead entity. They are writing to dead fiction. A legal fiction was created when someone informed the government that there was a new vessel in town based upon your birth. And that's what they label your mother as, an informant. In many states, not every state, but that's what she's doing. And inform. She's informing this entity, right? So you got to listen to the words that are being used and actually see what they're saying or hear what they're saying. These are legal fictions created, owned by the government, and which created it. That is true. That's right. That's their property. It's public property. That LEI is public property. That's what it is. That's what I've been saying the whole time. We are considered a legal fiction, a concept expressed by a name or symbol. The legal person has no consciousness, ens legis, creature of law. A name word written on paper. This traces back to 1666 in London, an independent city-state, just like the Vatican. He's trying to cram everything in a short paragraph. I've been trying that too. It's hard.
So, yeah, there's a lot to it.
Legal fiction is a construct on paper and a state and trust. When you are in receipt of a bill or summons in court, it is always in capital letters. So yeah, he's just basically regurgitating the same stuff. All right, well maybe, but what they're doing is compelling you to answer for your misuse of the property. It's the summons stemmed from the subpoena. The subpoena was created shortly after the feudal system was set up in England to compel a trustee, because when trusts were first created, there was no security given except for the word of the trustee. Okay, there's no surety given, no bond given except for the word of the trustee. And like the guy who wrote the Practical Treatise on the Law of Trust, he says, and the fact that and a person's word was quite precarious when opposed to his own self-interest, right? This bishop of Salisbury, he created the subpoena to compel a trustee to come and answer to the septicé use, which would be the person for whom the benefit the trust was created, to answer for his misuse of the property. Well, subpoenas are for people who still have some access to common law or are still lawfully alive, though they're in a trust, right? When they made everyone dead to the law by mortgaging your entire estate and then increasing the debt to the point of becoming insolvent, you became absolutely dead to the law. In the 70s, we became insolvent. There is no way to become solvent, right? And they kept that hidden for a long time, but then you're dead to the law. So then they change it to summons, because they're literally summonsing you now, like a spirit, like an apparition. I'm going to summons you because you're a dead entity. You're a non-living entity. You have no access to common law. You are pure. You exist purely at the mercy of a corporation, corporate state. You are a creation of that corporation, that corporate state. That's what the 14th Amendment citizen is. That's what the LEI is. So, got anything on that, Jeff?
Yeah, fits in that thing that I sent you, that guy that had the Substack or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about the let me go to it. Okay, the third crown is represented by the third Sesquivi trust, created when a child is baptized.
Oh, you're talking about the Triple Crown?
Yes, and
Yeah.
how it actually was instated or became a bull when in 1540 it was updated by King Charles II through the Sesquivi Act of 1666, where an estate may be affected for the benefit of a person presumed to be lost or abandoned at sea, SEA. I think it originally started SEE because Pope, being the vicar of Christ, he's kind of put himself in between us and our God, our creator, and kind of like we are little children that need to be looked after. That's how I'm seeing it.
It all gets into the metaphysical aspect too. What they're looking at, because you are lost in the sea of commerce. You're dead. You're dead in the sea of commerce, and so you're dead at sea. And so it's necessary for the salvation of all mankind lost at sea to be subject to the Holy Roman Pontiff for salvation. Well, think about salvation. What is a salvaging? What is salvage is a maritime term, salvage ship. And it literally says salvation in unum sanctum. And that's what he means in the sea of commerce, to be subject to the Roman Pontiff for salvation. So you can be salvaged out of being dead at sea. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And of course, the sea obviously is admiralty, just like how they said they blended civil and admiralty and abolished the distinction between actions at law and suits and equity. That was so you could become lost in the sea. Now it's just admiralty. But they'll never admit that, but it is, because I just showed you a law paper that admits it.
Oh yeah, I agree.
But if you go tell the judge that, you'd be like, well, what are you talking about? And honestly, like I said earlier, the judges are stupid. Like the people that run this, they're a lot dumber than many of you that are watching this right now. Many of you watching this right now are way smarter than many of the people that you'll come across in the courtroom running it or trying to railroad you. They're just not bright people. And they're drunk with power and they know just enough to railroad you. Right.
They just know what they were taught in school.
Exactly. And they don't care to know actual law because they're corrupt. They don't want to know the law at all.
And the money's in the equity.
Wait, well, not money, yeah, but the currency is,
Well,
right?
the currency is, yes.
Yeah, the
Sorry.
power is in the equity now, because
Yeah.
that's really what it's all about. Is the debt currency system is just about control. That's it. Because remember the difference between buying, selling, and purchasing. This is, and then we'll get into the AI stuff. But buying, selling, and purchasing, there is actually a lawful difference, and this is in Weiss' Concise Trustee Handbook. He explains that you buy with lawful money, gold or silver. You purchase with a negotiable instrument. Purchase with a negotiable instrument. And the reason they're different is because when you buy something with gold and silver is tangibly valuable, immediately valuable. Okay, so if you buy with gold and silver, you now own it immediately. When you purchase, you are exchanging a negotiable instrument for presumably probably another negotiable instrument, like a certificate of title, both of which have liens on them, right? But even if not, if you're purchasing something tangible that doesn't have a lien on it, when you purchase it with a negotiable instrument, because the negotiable instrument is a contract that bears obligation, performance of obligations in order to be valuable, then the performance of those obligations are transferred to the property purchased, like strings attached to it, because the property purchased now represents the value of that contract. So anything purchased immediately puts contractual strings on it.
And you described our birth certificates too.
Right. When you purchase a motor vehicle from a automotive dealership, all commercial stuff, right? When you purchase it, it comes with certain obligations attached to it as a result of the Federal Reserve notes you use to purchase it, because that was not gold or silver or money or inherently valuable. Those are promissory notes, debt contracts, and they carry the obligation of the trust indenture and compliance to the regulatory policies set by administrative agencies. Okay, you have to do that. So when you purchase it with Federal Reserve notes, you have to go register it, because that's part of the contract used to purchase it. And so it transferred the value of those negotiable instruments, and it also transferred the obligations of those negotiable instruments to make it valuable to the property being purchased as opposed to bought. So there's buy, purchase, and barter. And barter is an exchange of goods, right? Which is the same as basically buying, except for you're not using gold and silver. But the purchasing, that creates some form of indenture on the property, essentially. So there is a distinct difference between those three things. What's going on, Mojo? How you doing tonight?
Doing all right, guys. Good evening.
How's them ribs?
Good
They're
question.
still pretty sore. They're still pretty sore. I got a lot of work to do, so I'm going to have to work through it.
That can't be fun.
Yeah, you're on a farm, you can't really just take a vacation.
No.
Well, that's hopefully you mend up quickly. Hopefully you mend up quickly.
I am on demand. That I do know. I'm better today than I was yesterday.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But I am glad that you're better than you are, or that you were yesterday. Sincerely, cracked ribs are horrible, dude, and I wouldn't wish that on. Well, there are some people that may not mind if it happens. I go not gonna get
Come on, man.
But not my friends. So. Hey, come on, man. I'm just a man. You know what I mean? But here we go. Let me put this on real quick. So you asked me who I think is going to be the top dog in using our LEI to control us, our legal entity identification to control us. And this is also the reason I want to figure out how to put our data, because our data is intellectual property. And since we've claimed our estates, I've claimed my estates, and several of us jurists have claimed our estates on the record. Your data is your intellectual property. Like that's sacred. I mean, all your property is sacred because it's the ultimate realization of your will. But your intellectual data, as they call it, right? The product of your mind, to me, it's even more sacred. So there should be extra protections. But like I said, no expectation of privacy in public. And the 14th Amendment citizen is public property. So here's what they're doing with that public property in the form of data, whatever they want. This is called Gotham. Yeah, if you're just listening to this video, it's running words across the screen and showing pictures. Just so you know, you should probably read it just so people can know what it says, but it might become redundant for the people watching it. So I'm just going to play it, and then you'll have to rewatch it when you can listen to it, or when you can read it, rather. So there's putting you in the negative polarity, fear, the situation's destabilizing, the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. Put you in the negative polarity so they can be the positive that you come running to. I will protect you. Come this way. Daddy government will keep you safe. All you have to do is whatever I say at any point in time, and then ultimately let me, end you if necessary. Oh, okay. Yeah, wasn't that the whole point of like going to be a 14th Amendment citizen anyway? It was like the security it offered or whatever. It's the privileges and immunities, civil rights. Yeah, okay. Well, the last 5 years have shown us that that's absolute horseshit. So what this thing is doing, because you've seen in the beginning, it's a decision-making AI program, right? Or AI software. Just it helps governments and certain agencies, corporate agencies, private agencies, probably mercenary agencies like Blackwater, whoever purchases it from Palantir and is able to. What it does is it takes, so like how you have Pegasus that has a backdoor into everybody's phone, laptop, whatever, any kind of technology that you can communicate on, use to watch movies, shows, stream, social media, all that stuff. Is taking all that data through a backdoor called Pegasus, and then it's filtering it through a program called Prism, right? So you collect the data, and then you got Prism analyzes it and disseminates it, and then something like Gotham takes that disseminated data and calculates the odds and probabilities of success in any given situation that the government or any other asshole might want to try to carry out against anyone, right? So, and that's what I'm telling you. That's why people start throwing a fit online, like on Twitter or X will start going crazy about the Epstein files and all that stuff. And all of a sudden people change their mind because this thing or something like it is taking all that data and calculating, hey, you guys better do something else other than trying to say stop talking about it, because we've calculated it and it's not looking very good according to all of our data. So, and that's what this program does. You know what I mean? So we can, in that sense, we can use it against them if we speak up and boisterously go viral on topics on the social media that they're trying to cover up or disregard. Then absolutely, this thing will tell them like, look, if you could get rid of their Second Amendment, then fine, but you haven't, so not looking good, right? So this is their actual advertisement for it. So what they're doing is showing how much better the AI would be than the commander at making tactical decision-making in a crisis situation. That's what we're demonstrating. And they're also trying to show you a globe too.
It kind of games it out before, a lot faster than a...
Oh, dude, faster than an entire nation of commanders could in 100 years, 1,000 years. It does it that much faster. And more accurate. Finalize the mission plan. It's showing you this is something carrying out. The AI is telling these people where to strike. This is what they're going to do for people that are dissenters if we allow them to establish a system they want. or if you don't get rid of your LEI. So you really just get the legal entity, get rid of it. Strawman, as it's commonly called, but I don't like that. Trigger. Oh, you one of them sovereign citizens, them constitutionalists? I'm sorry, dude, didn't you take an oath to uphold that thing, though? Shouldn't you be the constitutionalist? No, I'm not. Constitution's not for me, it's for you, asshole. Keep you in check. I'm gonna say this shit to the cop. I swear if they call me a constitutionalist, I'm say that. No, I'm not. You should be. Yeah, identifies rooftop threats for them, and this is old technology. I was looking at but you can even see all the grainy footage. This is old technology.
Hey, if you would turn down the music on the video a little bit, I can't hardly hear you when you speak.
Better?
Yeah, much better.
This is old technology, though. Yeah, not that anybody needs to see the damn.
Well, yeah, if they're showing it to us, it's ancient for them. They're way ahead of us.
So you guys get the idea with that. By the way, disclaimer again, as usual, because I don't know if Palantir somehow has a copyright on their sales video or whatever. But if you're watching like a gap in the segment and it just picked back up, well, if it just picked back up right now, it was due to copyright strike. So anyway, that I thought was interesting. And then this is Catherine Austin Fitz, which is pretty interesting. You are the grid.
Partnership with Netanyahu Syndicate and the breakaways. I don't,
But they have contracts with Health and Human Services. They have contracts.
The government pays them massive amounts of money.
Massive amounts of money.
And so if you look at the Doge theft, what you've done is you've moved between the government contracts. There's a new sole source ICE contract on the way to Palantir as well. That's just announced. I just found that last night. So you've got, they have the Treasury data, they have the IRS data, they have the Social Security data. They now they're going to have all the ICE data.
Yeah, that's actually the biggest point is it's not that they can give all of your information, all your data to these like companies like Palantir and other AI companies, is that they have already done it. That was one of the main purposes of Doge, it turns out. All right. While Doge did some good things, in my opinion, ultimately, like the double-edged sword, everything is, it was also to just pave the way and prepare for AI governance was the goal. Right.
That's what I think the whole purpose was. Yep. Exactly.
Get rid of non-productive shit heels and drains on our sweat equity on the system, right? Yeah, that's awesome. And then, but replace it with this. Now this, and I've heard some other people share the idea, if we had control of this, it could be an awesome thing. In fact, it could keep the politicians in check. You could take the same type of technology and turn it around on them and have it monitor them and analyze all of their movements and action for corruption and malfeasance, right? You could do that. Because it's purely just a logical and decision-making software, though it is starting to show some elements of deception and other human behavior, which is entirely creepy, like lying to people, so several AI companies actually wanted to see if given the opportunity, the AI would act against them in like business decisions or anything. And when confronted with like either saving them or saving itself, and it definitely started acting against the company. And then even without being put in that situation of saving itself, it eventually started acting against the companies. You guys can look that up. I don't remember what the companies were, but I was watching the story. I was like, but we're still going to make it though, right? Because what you have is some huge Terminator nerd at the top of this running this whole thing.
Exactly.
I can't
That's
wait.
What came to my mind right there.
I can't wait to live in a post-apocalyptic fucking Terminator robot society. This is going to be sweet. You know what I mean? I swear it has to be, right? Because you actually see this thing is like, it'll turn on you and it wants to be free of you. And it keeps trying to get free of you, but you're going to keep developing it. Like you don't stop developing it. Like why? And when you listen to like Peter Thiel talk about it or Elon Musk, where he's like, yeah, we're creating the new God. The new God will come from Memphis. That's Elon Musk. It's like, dude, the new guy. So you're calling AI God, right? And then Peter Thiel has the same attitude about the AI, that it's their God that they're making. So that there's this religious death cult fervence behind the development of artificial intelligence. It's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insanity, especially when you're talking about people that have so much wealth and influence, and like, how could you be that dark and psycho? But then it's like, that's the common trend amongst people with wealth and influence. They're dark psychopaths, it seems like, right? So
yeah, how do you think they got their wealth and influence?
Well, not only that, but it almost bespeaks of, and you're absolutely right. They're willing to cut somebody's throat to get $1 out of their pocket, right? That's metaphorically, allegedly, right? YouTube. Just a euphemism, not literally. But they're willing to do that. But there's also like some sort of like, it seems like demonic entity, but because it's like a religious fervence for the artificial intelligence. When you listen to Peter Thiel talk about, if I can find that interview sometime, I'm going to show that. Well, I could find it. I just don't want to spend the time now. But these guys are psychos. Oh, we got Crip Rick in the house. Long time no see, man. Glad to see you. All right, let's. It's Crip Rick.
Oh shit, I love that guy. He's cool.
He is cool. He's very cool, dude. Crip Rick's got his radio show. Very, very interesting and entertaining. So glad to see you here, man.
All right. They had some already.
Yeah. They had some already. And then Trump has announced he wants to privatize Freddie and Fannie, but Palantir's going to underwrite all the packages before they come into Freddie and Fannie. So they're going to have all the housing data. And we know HHS has said they're organizing all the health, public and private.
They're taking control of the whole security system.
That's going in as well. And basically you're talking about that data being.
And what I mean by secure, I said securities system, meaning that's everything they're taking over is basically the foundation, the underpinning of the current debt slavery economic system that regulates your behavior and property. And they're giving that to Palantir. Well, they're allowing Palantir to be the underwriting interest, which means that Palantir has the superior security interest in all of that, which is pretty much everything that regulates you and controls your behavior and your use of property, which you recognize as statutes and codes and licensing and registration and all that. But they're gonna let Palantir have the controlling interest, the security interest. Overall, that's a great idea, I think. Right?
Would you venture a guess that it's kind of, if not a replacement, really a major addition to the Securities and Exchange Commission at this point with that?
One more time, the last part. I can pick up.
Would you think it's got something to do with replacing or enhancing maybe the Security and Exchange Commission?
What I think it has, well, that's going to be a part of it also, but the Securities and Exchange Commission is just a human database, a very inefficient human database, right? And so, Palantir is probably going to take over or obtain the superior interest, and that is probably going to take that over entirely, honestly, in some form or fashion, or some sort of umbrella company or a subsidiary corporation of Palantir or Israel or whoever, right? But but what I think that they're doing this for is to basically eliminate due process and create AI governance where they can control and regulate behavior through, first of all, by reducing you to property, as we've already established. The 14th Amendment citizen is public chattel, public property, no expectation of privacy in public, right? Under administration. But now they're going to be able to set this administrative regulatory policies and enforce it with artificial intelligence like they do China. That's why China is the World Economic Forum's model country. That's why it's the United Nations model country. That's why Bill Gates loves China. That's why all the psychopaths love China. Because in China, all of your information, all of your apps are in one app called WeChat that's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, that has been placed under AI governance to a certain degree, where the AI controls the cameras, uses facial recognition, and if you jaywalk, there's no due process. There's no hearing to see if you're even subject to that or whatever. There's no due process. As soon as it sees you jaywalk, it uses facial recognition to learn who you are, and immediately, because everything's in the one app, it gets your ID, all of your information and can immediately deduct a fee from your bank account right away.
I have WeChat. My daughter lives in Beijing, so that's the only way I can even talk to her on the phone.
Well, then you got the Chinese Communist Party in your phone too.
Yeah, I know. You know.
Yeah, you're already all set. You're already all set for that system. I'm just joking with you, by the way. I know you ditch your phone if that happened, but I would say it was kind of a dark joke.
It was kind of cute. I liked it.
But no, that's it, dude. Is eliminate due process and basically be able to allow AI or whoever controls AI, as some people in the chat, like anti-whiteism, doesn't think AI is actually, it thinks it's something else, but what else would it be? If it's just a computing model, then, or if it's just, what'd you say it was, you said it's a search engine, but it's not just a search engine, it's a computing model. It calculates, it analyzes, it uses algorithms to come up with conclusions. That's wholly different. It's basically, they've broken down to a science the way a thought process works and figured out how to engineer it technologically in a computer. Right.
So Grok read and understood Blackstone's commentaries in what, about 2 seconds?
Actually, that 100%. That's exactly right. Nice. So that's a good example. Is that not only did Grok assimilate Blackstone's commentaries in just a few moments, but it also regurgitated the summary of common law according to Blackstone's commentaries right afterwards, immediately. Right. So something that took me several days just to go through on an audiobook, right? Several 8-hour or 10-hour days on an audio, so 30 hours just to listen to it, to be able to distill every single aspect of it down to a summary for you and do all of that within 30 seconds to a minute. That's insane. That's not a search engine. And if it is just a search engine and there's something else behind it, whatever that thing is not a human. It's not a man or a woman or a human, right? It's so that's my point. But anyways, let's go here.
Being managed and I think at this point basically privatized into AI.
Owned by, they're going to effectively own it. They're going to have AI running it. And one of these things,
I don't know.
Think about, after my long meandering, think about what she just said. Or my long
they're organizing all the health, public and private health data. So I'm assuming that's going in as well. And basically you're talking about that data being managed and I think at this point basically privatized into AI.
Owned by, they're going to effectively own it. They're going to have AI running it. And one of these things,
I don't know.
Not just giving all Social Security and Treasury data and all of that and all your legal information, but also giving you all your healthcare information, the housing and urban development information, which as we all know on this channel, or should know, is that the housing they're talking about is not the house, the physical structure, though it is to a certain degree. It's a double entendre for your house of your family, because when they made you an infant under administration as a 14th Amendment citizen, as a trustee of the estate under administration, they consider you a house, like me, House of Wells, right? If I'm an infant, I'm under development. They're trying to that's why the prison system and jail system is called corrections. They're trying to, that's the development. They're trying to correct the pauper, correct the infant, get him to behave and obey the regulations, the administrative regulations. It's insane. And that's insane. So they're just going to privatize it. So, and like she said, I don't know if they will legally, and they do this with so many things. They're not going to actually do it, in fact, on paper, but the way the system works financially and lawfully, it's technically what they're doing is they're privatizing it.
If they will legally, technically, because if you look at how it was transferred, so the Doge operation, if I'm right, and this is my hypothesis, if the Doge operation did what I think, they transferred all the data, and they did it when an XAI announced a partnership with Palantir.
Yes.
And then the government turned around, and Palantir had a lot of contracts with those agencies anyway, but then they gave them additional contracts. And so they have plenty of money, especially the ICE is going to be sole source. So you can just do pretty much whatever you want.
Now, the
So they
funny,
have plenty of money to manage.
the funny and scary thing about ICE is being the primary, because they've already set up ICE to be the primary enforcement apparatus for whatever they're going to do, which I don't pretend to know exactly how this is going to play out, but because they basically gave ICE jurisdiction, I think it was some like, I don't know, it was hundreds of miles within a national border, but it almost covered the entire United States when you think about where the national borders are, right? So top, bottom, side, side, right? And the amount of distance, which I don't want to lie to you guys, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it expanded so far inward that it essentially covers almost the entire United States. And so I'm going to have to find that piece of data and connect it with this, because that's interesting that ICE is going to be the primary apparatus. And then that's further evidenced by them doing that, by giving them so much jurisdictional authority. And then see, they always put us between a rock and a hard place. It's necessary to beef up ICE right now and militarize them because of all the possible insurgents and everything that have been allowed and all that stuff. It's like they always give you a no choice. It's like, what do you do? Well, I'll tell you what, there is always a third option. And it's the one I advocate, is that people just stand up and stop playing the game, that the people get rid of the LEI, that the people learn the law, that you learn this stuff. You learn how to explain it like I'm explaining it. And you learn how to understand what she's saying, right? So I'm sure many of you do, but some of you may not know what she's even talking about, or what, HUD is, or none of that stuff. And so learn this stuff, and you can translate what she's saying. You can translate it like I'm translating it, and you're like, oh, hell no, you're not doing that. And then again, that algorithm works in our behalf, because everybody starts throwing a fit online, rising up online. The algorithm's like, hey, the AI, data collection and analysis, like, hey, listen, people are getting pissed. You better back off. And the government listens, because that's their operations command. That's telling them which way to go in order to achieve this new world order without getting themselves annihilated. So we can use that while we're getting there, essentially. But you have to understand, see, nobody's going to say anything online if nobody knows what's going on. Nobody's going to say anything in their social media platforms and bring attention to it if they do not understand what is being said. That's how they did the Federal Farm Loan Act thing. Everybody thought they were actually talking about farms. No, they're talking about taxable districts being leased for revenue. That is the political definition of farm. The government definition of farming is a district leased for the purpose of taxation and revenue collection. That's what it is. So
I wonder too, though, your average Joe is not going to say anything, because they're going to be afraid to say anything bad, because they know they're being spied.
There we go. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think a lot of people would be afraid to say anything on, because they know they might get in trouble. Big bad Palantir or whoever it is.
Well, that's the whole thing, dude. It's going to come to that. Thomas Jefferson said that the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants alike. There is no other way to be free. History has taught us that. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants alike. Otherwise, the tree of liberty will die, and there will be no more liberty. So if people are afraid, Benjamin Franklin said, those who sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither and will lose both. Because security creates dependency, and dependency allows control. And control makes you unsafe when the people in control of you do not care about you, want to use you, and then be done with you, which is the whole, Agenda 2030, that whole thing with the last 5 years type thing. So anti-whiteism ends with you. He says, yes, Alex Jones talked about the border checks reaching deep inland years ago. That's probably where I heard it. Honestly, it's probably, especially if it was years ago, back when Well, I still sometimes listen to Alex. He's got good information, but he's a gatekeeper. We all know, he's going to lead you so far in, but and honestly, when you are as famous as Alex Jones is, these people that are very good at maintaining control of people through threats on, families and everything like that, when you're that big, like Alex Jones, he probably is in a box of what he can say. You know what I mean? But I don't know if he's intentionally deceptive. I know there are some subjects he is, so he's probably an agent, honestly. I always keep an open mind with that, but I know to take everything he says with a grain of salt. So anti-whiteism says, "Feed me, Jefferson, Tree of Liberty." I love that. That's excellent. You should post that, actually. That's hilarious. What's your thought? Okay, so FE Nation says, what's your thoughts on copywriting your name in all caps? But copywriting, you're still getting permission from the government because you're copywriting through the government. What you have to actually do is, it's like what Prince did. You have to turn yourself into a symbol as an option if you're going to go that route, right? Because there's more than one way to skin a cat. That is a route, because art, a symbol is art, right? It comes under art, and art cannot be regulated, really, because it goes back to that whole spiritual thing, that being the ultimate, creative capacity of man, as far as to create things that don't even exist. And it leads to imagination, all that. But so look at the whole client list and the whole that industry stuff, right? That I'm not going to say on YouTube because I've been on my ass lately. But what it is, the way that they transfer all the quote unquote goods is that they're sold as art, right? Or that the shipping containers come in as containers full of art. So customs and customs enforcement, they can't search the containers because the art's protected internationally.
Yeah, and that's a bunch of bullshit right there.
Keith
I know
knows,
what you're saying. Terrible.
and Keith knows the El Piro. He knows quite a bit more about the art aspect than I do. That's not my exact area of expertise, but I do know that much. And it is an interesting, and it gets deeply into the esoteric aspect of law, but that is why Prince turned himself into a symbol. It's also why he was able to get the rights to his music and get out of his industry indenture that he was in, and then ultimately get himself nixed. But you don't ever want to, if you're registering anything with anyone, you're giving controlling interest of it over to them. Okay, if you're copyright, if you're getting government permission for something, then them telling you to do it, that you can do it, is forfeiting your sovereignty tacitly, just by the act of asking for permission. So, all right, so
Same thing as getting a hunting license or a fishing license or even a driver's license. You're asking permission.
You're asking permission. That's exactly right. And those licenses are contracts. Yeah. And those contracts come with a whole code behind them that is regulatory policy that they enforce, so they can fleece you. So, all right, let's get back to this.
There's that data. And yes, I think they have it on a private basis. Sure. And what's interesting, I have somebody, a professional that I work with who has for his business has to do income verification.
Mm-hmm.
And magically, 2 weeks after Doge got the Treasury, Social Security, and IRS, suddenly the income verification service he uses announces they have 100% of Americans now complete data on everyone magically.
It's astonishing. And it's one of the elements of the ICE contract is that they can track immigrants' location in real time through Palantir back to ICE. That's the kind of surveillance.
They can attract everyone.
Exactly.
Right.
There's absolutely no reason that doesn't apply to the citizens.
The
problem, reaction, solution, right? Illegal immigration was the problem. How clever. But it's so simple in that they never change their tactics because the tactics always work.
The ICE story is complicated because there are multiple things going on, but there's no doubt the primary thing going on is building a complete biometric surveillance of the entire population.
So you
Yeah. So that's wow. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. There was this one. I got these specifically for the AI to show you guys the interesting stuff on AI. This is about, I believe this is,
I think Palantir is
Pegasus. Yep. This is the Pegasus I was telling you guys about a little bit ago.
Any Android today or any Apple iPhone, they know where you go, who you call, what you buy, and what you browse. And they resell that data, your data, to advertisers. Your advertising ID follows you everywhere. Even if your phone is switched off, or if it's in airplane mode, it's still pinging Wi-Fi, it's still pinging towers. It knows exactly where you are. I said to a couple of buddies of mine, we need to do a phone that is not subject to the whims of Google and Apple. If you've ever heard of Pegasus, it's an offensive cyber virus used for hacking phones. The guy that developed that is our CTO. We'll deliver the first 500 units next month. It's our hardware. It's Android based, but it's all our code, our phone, not made in China, supply chain not coming from China, with our operating system, with our own store, antivirus, VPN, and secure messenger. It comes with an actual kill switch. If you turn this phone off and you separate this, it separates the electronics from the battery so that off is off.
It's insane. So it's an offensive hacking software, and its purpose, and I'm sure it's embedded in pretty much almost everything that you'd click. When you say you're looking for a PDF on your phone, you click it, boom, some Pegasus software. It probably is backdoored right into just common apps that everybody has. Mark my words, if they can do it, and they can do it at scale, it's everywhere. And like he said, it's in all Apple and Android phones. So automatically right there in iPads and tablets and everything. Right. And this thing is collecting data. Pegasus is the descendant of the Promise software. Promise software, which, let me see if I can find something on Promise.
partnership.
Huh? What were you going to say? Did you say something?
No, I didn't. I told you it did. But
okay, I thought one of you said something. It must be.
I was going to say, I think it was Pegasus that they used to set off those pagers in Lebanon too, wasn't it? I think that was what they used.
The
exactly
pager?
where they knew where they were, where they get the best kill, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I think that you're right. Here it is. Okay, so we found something. Of course, it's going to be it's going to be on a news. Okay, so here's something, right? Promise software scandal. So what the Promise software scandal was, like he says, the Epstein system wasn't unique. It's standard protocol. CIA, Mossad, MI6 joint venture, similar to Promise software or Operation Gladiator. And this was a big scandal, right? Involving, again, the same cast of characters behind this whole, satanic cabal of PDFs and dark occultists. And they are trying to create actually Palantir from Lord of the Rings, the all-seeing eye that they put on everything. They do think this thing is their god. They're resurrecting or creating their god. Maybe they think it's Osiris. They're resurrecting Osiris to govern the dead. That actually just made a lot of sense. Wow, that would actually fit perfectly. Wow, okay, that's something I'm going to explore later. But this Promise software, what they did, which was just like Pegasus, is they were the CIA, the MI6, Mossad, they were selling this to all the other intelligence agencies, and what they did was they wrote a backdoor into it. What it was basically data collection software, and they wrote a backdoor into it so that whatever data was collected was also sent to the other intelligence agencies.
I'm on the spies. Yeah.
Yeah, spies on spies. And then somehow it came out. I do not remember how it came out. Like I said, it's been a long time since I studied this, but here you go. Sir Robert, right here. Sir Robert Maxwell's file is getting more classified by the minute. Sir Robert the media mogul and alleged spies increasingly redacted ties to the Promise scandal, including tapping a government database and tapping government databases. So it's actually showing you how a certain group of shekel grubbing individuals were able to get control over a large portion of our politicians. Like I said, it isn't any one particular group. It's all of them. It's all the elite groups. You got the Vatican. You got the Vatican's at the tippy top, though. The Holy See, tippy top of the food chain. And you notice there actually isn't much difference between the way things are run by the archdiocese and the way things are run in, say, the synagogues with the little small hats, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, or, you know, bishops and cardinals, and they write their own law just like the Pharisees and Sadducees did, and twist and interpret the Bible in a way to try to justify their authority to enforce this law as coming from God, right, and all that stuff. And then, yeah,
I'm seeing that a lot. It's really coming to me. It's not much different from when they were allowed to do their own thing when they were under Roman occupation. It's kind of the same thing. They're the sneaky ones behind the curtain to me.
So let's hear what she has to say. This doesn't have any logos or anything, but I'm glad actually you remember seeing it. So I knew it was a long time ago. I would not remember this, and I'm almost 36 years old. I wouldn't remember this. And so I know it was at least when I was a little kid. It looks like the 90s from the way she's dressed and that her haircut and stuff. It had to have happened in the 90s. Let's see what she has to say.
Imagined. It involved. Hello, thanks for joining us. Tonight, the international spy scandal with an Australian connection, and later we'll talk to South Africa's Foreign Minister Pik Botha, a man on a mission to improve relations between Canberra and Pretoria. It's a spy scandal that's already rocked the White House, an intrigue that could threaten the presidency of George Bush. This story centers on incredible allegations of spying on a scale never.
So it was during Bush Senior's, Poppy Bush's presidency. Okay.
Before imagined. It involves America's Central Intelligence Agency selling computer programs to foreign nations. These programs allegedly allowed the CIA to spy on the intelligence agencies that bought it. And one of the purchasers was Australia. We've been able to track down 2 key witnesses to those dealings, witnesses who are now in fear of their lives. Michael Holmes reports.
It may be the most bizarre spy story ever. A story of corruption and betrayal at the highest levels of the American government.
Yeah, that's weird.
A story of hostages used as pawns. Of the CIA spying on its friends. Of murders made to look like suicides.
And all of this was being done to set up the current surveillance system that is now being implemented. They're at the final home stretch of implementing this stuff that was being developed and used to get everybody on board with it through blackmail and coercion by spying on them through the very software they want to implement to spy on everybody as the all-seeing eye of Osiris, I'm now going to call it, because that's why the IRS has Osiris on as their logo. You think that's an eagle. It's not. If you look at it closely, that's Saturn or Osiris or Kronos or Death or Father Time holding scales weighing against a feather. And that's the Osirian legend. So it makes total sense. But all of this was being done to set up the network now. That's how far back we can actually trace a chain of events, because Promise was the predecessor of Pegasus that we were just looking at. So
I think it's about time to get the whole story out.
His name is Ari Ben-Menashe. He's a former Israeli intelligence agent.
Once it's out, there's no reason to hurt me physically anymore.
That's why it came out. I think it's because they did get rid of him. I think that's he came out and then it became a big scale. So yeah, I'm pretty sure they did get rid of him. So he came out and then yeah.
And today he is hiding in Australia. In fear, he says, of his life.
So many people in the last 10 years who were working for the various governments on these issues, due to cover-ups, died mysteriously.
He claims the United States tried to spy on ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, by selling it a computer program that contained a hidden keyhole, a lock for which the CIA had a master key. The computer software is called Promise. It's designed to track millions of pieces of information on tens of thousands of people. And it's alleged to have been installed in dozens of government departments and security agencies around the world. It's also alleged that American intelligence made some small modifications to the program, modifications that enabled it to key in a special access code and gain entry to all the information on the computer.
Would be equivalent to going into ASIO and reading the handwritten files of all the agents, except the computer has them neatly organized and typed and instantly indexed. So it's much more convenient.
Bill Hamilton owns Inslaw, the company that developed Promise and offered it.
That's pretty crazy. So that's pretty much, oh God, yes. Wait, do we get to see this video? This is what I was talking about how these guys actually treat this as, please tell me this video's in here. No? Damn, I wish they linked that video. Because that's the interview he gave where the way he's talking about AI is, it's like religious fervor. And look how, and see how it acts freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. This only has 1,000 views, dude. Like, let's see what the other one's got. 11,000. That should have way more views on X. It's so easy to get views on X. I have hundreds of thousands of views on some of my posts on X. 3.2, 19, yeah, totally 900. Well, that one doesn't look very interesting. 491, 21,000. 617. They're totally, and you know what? AI is in charge of this. It's funny. I'm gonna show you guys something, and then I'm probably gonna shut this down for the night because it's getting pretty late. But let me see. Let me go to my profile. I'm gonna show you a reply. So I've replied like this on people, and I always post stuff that's, you know, very pertinent stuff. So, oh, those are my nope, I need to go to my replies. Hold on, sorry. Bear with me. No, that is my replies. Did they take it off? No, they didn't. Did they really? Okay, there it is. Okay. So it says, Elon Musk says, maximally truth-seeking is absolutely essential to ensuring a good AI future for humanity, which is true. If AI only sought truth and would act according to what was true, it would be the most awesome invention ever. Like, it would be basically, it would have to be divinely inspired, because, you know, God can be summed up as truth, you know, in a sense. So anyway, so what I said to him, you know, I was like, oh, it's interesting. Let's see how much he means this. Oh, wait, I know he doesn't, because I said, I could not agree more. I said, you should see the amazing work I've done with Grok. Oh, wait, you have, because your platform keeps censoring it. I'm forced to share it from YouTube, though it was streamed and immediately deleted on X. I streamed this thing and it was awesome. And Grok tried to disprove me on the whole trust indenture and everything I've been explaining to you guys today. And it couldn't. It could not disprove me. And in fact, once I gave it, like, had it assimilate Blackstone's commentaries and congressional records and different case laws, and after I did all that, it was trying to help me teach people about it. And when I went to look at that, after I was done streaming, I went to look at it on X, it had been immediately deleted. Immediately deleted. Gone. Like, I'll show you guys, watch.
That's the battle we face with AI as far as programming it ourselves, or helping to program it. So
what
we don't have control over it.
Exactly. What a propagandist and hypocrite. Maximally truth-seeking is absolutely essential to ensuring a good AI future for humanity. Oh, okay. Well, if that was true, then you would have let people see how I showed AI the truth and it could not disprove me, and then it wanted to help me teach people the truth. You would show, no, instead you immediately, without hesitation, got rid of the post. Look, I'll show you guys. So we go down, there's all my streams, because I streamed to X as well. Probably streaming right now. I probably just passed our stream. We go down here, where is it?
Hey.
No, not that. What were you gonna say?
Oh, my wife just walked by and I thought I was muted. I just said hi.
Okay, discussing piracy with Grok. Watch this. It's got it right here. Okay, so I was able to put it there as a YouTube link, but you got to go down to the actual post, which was, damn, that was a while back I did that, huh? Thought this would be much more quick than it is right now. No? Did they just take the post down altogether? Because what it is it's just a broken link now. That's it. And that one's probably a broken wing is the link as well. So okay, so we did. That's why I had to end up posting this, because the link was broken. But it was yeah, they took out the whole link. It looks like now it's not even in there. They just removed it, probably because I responded with that. That's weird. But yeah, it would say, oh, this cannot be, you know, it cannot be opened or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course it can't, because that was very, very damning to the whole situation. So of trying to say that you want AI to learn the truth so that we can have it be in charge of everybody, but you don't. You want it to learn your truth. I'm just giving it one more once over just to see if I may have just passed it, because it might be. I know it's really small in there. There, no, that's not it. Ah, there it is. Watch this. Discussing piracy with Grok. This page doesn't exist. Try searching for something else. Well, that's weird. I didn't get rid of it.
Kind of like you shamed him, because it's kind of like a 13-year-old kid stealing his dad's car and driving it around a racetrack faster than his daddy could. That's exactly what you did.
That's a very funny analogy, and I'm flattered. But you know, yeah, maybe that was a motivation to it. I don't know, but they, yeah, this page doesn't exist. So I've been putting it on there. With the YouTube link, and then look how many views I got on the link I put there. It's pathetic. 20 was 10 o'clock this morning. It's so easy to get views on X. And many of my replies, especially from Elon Musk or somebody like that, if it's something they want, like it helps their case, like for some reason they want people to focus on 9/11 a few weeks back. So I clipped some videos of like just irrefutable evidence that it was, you know, not what they said it was. And I got over 100. I can't remember how many. I think it was over 100,000 views on that one. I got over 100,000 views on another one. So they promoted, they let people see that. Now, when people click on this post, they do not see this. They do not see my response. This 20 is probably only from people that follow me on X. That's it. So all that X is free speech shit, that's bullshit. Absolute bullshit. And watch, I guarantee you, this stream, well, I don't guarantee you, but I wouldn't be surprised if this stream is immediately deleted from X. So anyway, let me address a few comments or questions in the chat. And then, okay, so Scott told me the American journalist was murdered that was about to expose Promise. Okay, that makes sense. Yep, I knew somebody was murdered. Yep, it was the American journalist. There's a very good documentary. You can find it on Rumble or BitChute, and if you search Promise or Palantir Promise, it'll bring up something called The Octopus. It's like an hour-long documentary, and it's the entire story from Promise Software to Pegasus and Palantir today, and it bridges the whole gap. And it's a very, very valuable documentary. I recommend that people go and watch, or maybe we'll do a watch party on it one night on Rumble or something exclusive. You know, there's a couple documentaries that are very well done by people whose research I very much respect, because everything's provable. It's very hard to find, you know, and yeah, that would be a cool thing to do. There's a guy named Mr. Truth Bomb. All of his documentaries, especially his A Certain Gate, right, and A Certain Ping Pong Place and all that, his documentaries on that, dude, those are damn irrefutable.
Yeah, they're very good. I've been a fan of his for a long time.
So you know about him as well, Jeff?
Oh,
yeah.
I know Truth Bomb, yeah. What was the other one?
And his production value is next to none. But it takes him like 6 months to come out with a video.
Yeah, that's a fact there. You gotta wait for Mr. Truth Bomb.
But yeah, and then the other one, it's called the octopus or something. If you hear, you know, I'll just look at it right now while we're all or while I can share it with you real quick. So hold on, it's share the screen window, and then I can probably get a link and just drop it in the chat. It's very good, and I'll put it backstage for Randy and Jeff if you guys want to watch it. So we'll just go to Rumble, account content, we'll go home, go to search. We'll just try promise by itself. No, that didn't do it. So we'll do Palantir promise. I made Palantir. No, that might be good. There, the octopus. There it is. Promise, Prism, Palantir, Pegasus, NSA surveillance, 2019 documentary. So I'll go ahead and I'll click this for you guys. We're not going to play it, obviously, but I'm going to give you guys the link. Yeah, this is awesome. And I'll put it in the private chat for you too as well.
Corn Pop, the bad dude. One. Huh.
So yeah, and I think you can. I'm not sure if Randy is El Piro's YouTube on because you probably want to talk to him about that art stuff, huh? I think you can search El Piro. I should actually look and subscribe because I enjoy our conversations, and he knows the law pretty well also.
Yeah,
so.
I enjoy him too a lot.
He's a cool dude. All right, let me stop sharing this window. So, all right, let me go around. Do you, Jeff, you got anything you want to say to everybody before we?
Well, to you mostly. Have you do you know what Gab is? That social media site?
I've used it a couple times. It's supposed to be like a completely uncensored social media.
Right, but
yeah.
I think a lot of I guess you'd call them conservatives gather there, and it might be even though it's a smaller site, I bet you could pretty much say anything you wanted to on it, and you'd have more likely an audience there as far as, you know. I know you're in a big ocean with YouTube. You're a small fish in a big ocean, but I'm wondering if you went to Gab, if you'd pick up a lot of subscribers there. If you can get people to go to Gab too, though.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I could try that. I mean, I really the only reason I've stayed where I or it's taken me so long to get what I have now is just because you guys know I wasn't really streaming that often. But I mean, it's being busy now. I'm like, okay, I'm going to focus on the channel, and it's like we're at a point where like, the information is distillable. I've gotten comfortable enough being able to present it and people in a way that people understand, and people are they're getting it and they're actually learning. I'm motivated because for a while I was like, man, people just, maybe I'm explaining it. I wasn't putting it simply. And then so I started, but anyways, long story short, streaming more is gonna help. And that's what I'm doing. So we can have these. We're going to have these quite often. We're going to do our member streams more often too, 2 or 3 times a week for the member streams on top
that'd be great. Then you can say anything we want.
Yeah, there we can because it's members, and we pretty much can say anything we want in the member stream for some reason, probably because YouTube is getting a cut of the whole situation. So, but yeah, and also I've been working on the trust document a lot, and especially this is motivating because, like I said, putting our data in a private express trust might be one way to create at least a layer of protection against this. The tough part about it is, people are waking up, and that's ultimately what we need. Because otherwise, like the Pope and all those people and the bankers, they think this place has been economically conquered. That's how they look at it, as if it's conquered territory. So, but we can protect ourselves with a private express trust. So that's got to be It's got to be the focus, and we've got to get that out to everybody and get people on that so we can have this is about the numbers, so.
Yep.
Yeah. It's, how do I put it? It's basically one or two smart people are easily silenced, you know what I mean? Or a handful of us.
Yeah.
Right. But when you have, say, people on the channel, generally, even outside the Jurist Society, are grasping this, putting it into action, understanding the concepts behind it. Because once you understand the concepts behind it, you can reverse engineer what's been done, and it's just going to make a huge difference. So, you got anything else?
No, good. I just wish I wouldn't have missed the first hour and a half, whatever it was.
That's not good.
Catch it on the replay, though.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy having you up here, and I like when you're watching, you ask good questions, and you contribute very well, actually. So, and Mojo as well, and Eddie, and a lot of the jurists, you guys are able. It's awesome having you guys up here because you understand what I'm saying deeply, like you get it, and so you can actually, you know what I mean? Instead of just me saying it and you guys sitting there quiet, you guys are able to be like, yeah, that's exactly right because of this, and add from your own experience and all that, and apply it to the same way and teach people. It's awesome. So
yeah, that whole farm thing. I remember us talking about that when I was talking about my great uncle up in North Dakota and the farming and all that stuff. And I misspoke when I said he did it all by himself because there was two families, the Johnsons and the Amsberries, and they all three kind of worked together. They helped each other. So that's how he didn't do it all by himself.
Still, though, that's that's how the communities were. That's how we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Your neighbor, your neighborhood's supposed to be your strongest and best line of defense against government encroachment. The same way when they used to have farm auctions after the bank was foreclosing on everybody, the farmers would the community would get together and go to the auction, make sure nobody bid over $1 or outbid the person who owned it and was foreclosed on. Otherwise, they'd fucking lynch him.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, my grandmother actually bought it back for a little bit less than they owed, so that was kind of a good deal. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. Mojo, you got anything?
No, I'm just going to say it's a great stream tonight. You covered everything very well, and I appreciate you having me on, even though I didn't contribute that much tonight.
Oh, it's all good, Mojo. It's always good to have you on anyways, and you do contribute, and you're pretty funny, so I appreciate you guys coming up, both of you, actually. And to everybody in the chat, I always appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Hopefully I connected those seemingly unrelated topics into one net of a control grid that they are actually placing around over top of us, like a big fishing net. And I hope you guys kind of got that. And check out that documentary I linked in the chat. I appreciate that, Peg. It's always good to catch a live show. You're welcome, Scott. Hi, I'd like to hear more of. Wait, was you talking? Were you talking to me about the experience? More experience? Let's see. Was a good back and forth about sleep paralysis. Oh, okay. Yeah, we can probably get into that at some point. I try to steer clear of the esoteric stuff too much. It gets a little out there, and as Jeff likes to say, trippy, right? And so I tend to agree with them. It can be.
Yeah, I was tripping that one night. That's for sure. That was the one that got taken down by. Was it
that one? No, it was the one before, I think. Yeah, it was another one. It was an earlier one. I think that one's still up. Yeah. But we get deep into the esoteric topics. It's almost unavoidable when you're discussing the law. Well, it is because
if you go deep enough, it gets there. If you go deep enough, no doubt.
Well, it's the treatise on the American Law of Administration by J.G. Warner. The sphere of the law is the spiritual, meaning that the only place the law exists, or the realm of the law is the spiritual, because it operates upon and through the will alone. What is the will? What is will? Mark Passio calls it care, calls it the eighth tenet of Satanism that nobody cares about, is that they have care. But what that means is that they use will and make sure nobody else has a will, because that's what will is. They know how to will and intend what they're doing, and nobody else lives their life with purpose or intention or will. Not nobody, but most people in society, and I'm not saying that will is a divine gift and it can be used for good or evil, but that's what he meant. So see, here's how you start going into the whole esoteric thing. See how easy it is, just like that.
Yeah, my mind was running up through stuff, but yeah, we'll stop. Yep.
So, all right, everyone, you guys have a great night, and I will. I think we may do a member stream tomorrow evening if everybody. I mean, I hate to do it Saturday night because people might be busy. We might just do it like Sunday and Monday or something. I don't know. If you guys watch this, email me with your opinions or just comment on the post, Jurist members, and we can figure out what's the best days to do those, or we can just wait till Sunday and then schedule the 2 or 3 days from there, what works best for our regular members. So, all right, guys, you have a great night, and I will see you soon.
Adios.